Queer, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're set to hear that inflation will slow as the government fights to keep prices down.
A very good morning to you. Welcome aboard. It is 6 o'clock on Wednesday, the 15th of February. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster.
And leading our news this morning, the latest inflation figures will be released in the next hour, with the rate predicted to fall. The Prime Minister has vowed to cut inflation in half by the end of the year to ease the cost of living crisis.
Britain's equality watchdog has announced it'll end its monitoring of the Labour Party 2 years after a damning report into its handling of antisemitism complaints. Sir Keir Starmer hailed it as an important moment and urged those who oppose the changes to leave.
A GB News exclusive report on the people smugglers attempting to cross the Channel using a wider area of the southern coastline in an attempt to dodge French police patrols.
And Camilla will wear Queen Mary's crown for the King's coronation, making her the first queen in modern times not to have one made for her. The crown will be modified to remove the controversial Koh-i-Noor diamond, instead featuring gems honouring the late Queen.
There you go. Your views, get in touch the usual way. Here we are this Wednesday morning, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at GB News. Tell us what you're up to, where you're watching or where you're listening from. So the story we're leading with this morning is inflation figures. The latest ones are going to be released after 7 o'clock this morning. The rate is predicted to slow.
Well, as we all know, inflation has been the biggest battle, a problem for the government as well. The Prime Minister vowing to halve it by the end of the year.
Well, last month's numbers showed that CPI rose by 10.5% in December, down slightly from 10.7% the previous month.
Well, joining us now is finance expert Kevin Mountford to discuss the upcoming figures. Very good morning to you. Look, I think it's fair to say, isn't it, that last time around there was a bit of disappointment that inflation wasn't dropping more quickly. We kind of had been told, hadn't we, by Andrew Bailey that it was going to drop more quickly. So what do you expect to see today?
Yes, I think, to be fair to the Governor Bank of England, he said we've turned the corner and it will drop more quickly. But the general consensus is we'll see that more substantial drop from next month and beyond. A number of factors taken in place have a bit of a lag effect. So I suspect that we will see another drop as widely anticipated, but it won't be huge. And I think we'll still stay in double digits hopefully we'll see the back of double-digit inflation when we get into March and beyond. So, yeah, I expect the drop. That'll be the third time in succession. But I do think that relatively speaking, the drop will still be fairly minor. And just to put that into perspective, yesterday in the US, their inflation figures were announced and dropped to 6.4%. So obviously off a lower starting point, but that was still higher than anticipated. And I think it shows that there's still lots of volatility in the global market.
OK, so don't get too excited about that. But I suppose, Kevin, bad news for those people on strike, those people who are looking for increased pay rises.
Yes, and if you look at the average salary increases, then whilst I suppose relative to most years it's pretty high, they're still a lot lower than inflation. And I think timing's a big issue. So we hear that, there's certain unions looking for rises in line with inflation, but no doubt if those decisions can be held off, if the Bank of England are right, then we will see inflation maybe half by the time we get to the end of the year. So that we have to put the demand for current rate rises, salary rises, in the context of the wider kind of picture.
So you're managing expectations a little bit in terms of still wanting or expecting to see double digits later today. What is it that's keeping it high then, and why will that change, as you predict, from next month?
I think we've got to look at the fact that this, as I say, is a global issue. There's been lots of factors. Inflation kicked off at high starting point as a consequence of the pandemic. So suddenly huge pent-up demand for goods and services. And that's having an impact. Access to affordable labour, we've seen changes across the globe. And unfortunately, the dreadful events in Ukraine are really starting to hit home. So I think if you look at it on a general level, energy prices, oil prices have started to come down. I think we'll have seen that on our forecourts, albeit I have to say prices fluctuate massively depending where you're shopping for your petrol. And if we look at cost per barrel, that's hovering around about $78 at the moment. So that's maybe down $1.50 to $2 on several weeks back. So these are not huge changes, but they will filter through to things like transport costs, etc. The one important factor is there are still elements within the basket of goods and services that make up inflation, particularly things like fresh vegetables, fresh fruit. They are still extortionately high, maybe 15, 16%. So it just puts into perspective that the inflation drop, there's lots of benefits to it, but we don't all feel those benefits currently in our everyday lives.
Oh, we've run a poll on GB News today. We'll be giving details of that later on today. But whether it's right or wrong, Kevin, we've asked viewers and listeners what they think is contributing to higher costs, and most of them believe it's Brexit.
Yes, well, as I say, we've talked about the pandemic, we talk about the impact of the war in Ukraine, but sometimes we forget Brexit. And as I say, certainly foodstuffs tending to be very high, and an element of that will be due to what we import from continental Europe. So that's still having an effect. But I do think that, generally speaking, this has been a global issue. We've seen high inflation, relatively speaking, as I say, in the US, continental Europe. I mean, our company, Raisin, originated in Berlin, and they're at around about 9% in Germany as well. So we've seen global inflation, and that makes it very difficult to control it at a local kind of country level, albeit that we have seen increases in interest rates to try and curb available cash and then reduce demand for goods and services, as I mentioned earlier.
OK, listen, Kevin Mountford, thank you very much indeed, financial expert joining us this morning from Manchester. Good to get your views this morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Cheers. Britain's equality watchdogs announced that it will end its monitoring of the Labour Party. This is 2 years after a damning report into the handling of anti-Semitism complaints under Jeremy Corbyn.
Well, writing in the Times today, Sir Keir Starmer has hailed the decision as an important moment for Labour and said those who oppose the changes should leave the party.
But will it be enough to wipe out the stigma that has haunted the opposition? Our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, with this.
Antisemitism was unacceptable in any form in our party or our society.
I think it is a safe place for Jewish people, but if there are real concerns, we have to listen to them.
We are the anti-racist party in this country.
But for years, for Labour, allegations of anti-Semitism have stained the party's reputation. Under the leadership of Jeremy Corbyn, candidates, councillors and members were found to be involved in harassment, of using anti-Semitic tropes and dismissing complaints as fake or smears. The problem, it was alleged, went right to the top. Just before the 2019 election, nearly 9 in 10 British Jews said they believed that Jeremy Corbyn was anti-Semitic. They were angry and frightened. In one of the lowest moments for the opposition, Labour joined the BNP in becoming only the second political party ever to be investigated by the UK's human rights watchdog, the Equality and Human Rights Commission. In 2020, they found that Labour had breached the Equality Act 3 times, that there was unlawful harassment and discrimination during Jeremy Corbyn's 4.5 years as leader. Labour under Keir Starmer was placed in special measures. Today, though, the party has turned a corner, with the Commission now finding that over the past 2 years, Labour has improved its standards and procedures.
What we found was that there was interference from the office of the then leader of the Labour Party, and that's all documented in the report that we published in October 2020. Obviously, as you know, the leadership of the Labour Party has changed since then. They've now changed their constitution. In fact, the National Executive Committee has changed the constitution. So whether in respect of the leadership or in the procedural issues that we were also concerned about, we have been monitoring the Labour Party's processes over the last couple of years, and we have now concluded that they've implemented the actions we required of them.
This report is, of course, welcome news for Labour and Sir Keir Starmer, who spent an awful lot of time over the last 3 years trying to put considerable distance between himself and Jeremy Corbyn. And while the Board of Deputies of British Jews believe that things are now better, it does come with a note of caution that problems remain, or as they put it, that the job is not yet complete. As for Jeremy Corbyn, he remains suspended from the PLP, with Labour insistent he will not stand as their candidate at the next election. Keir Starmer will be hoping that this decision and today's report will turn the page on one of Labour's most toxic and difficult chapters. Darren McCaffrey, GB News.
Just to say, we're going to have more on this throughout the programme this morning, and if you've got a view, if you've got an opinion, if you think things have changed, if you think things haven't changed, we'd like to hear from you.
Yeah, and actually Sir Keir Starmer's giving a speech on this, which we will take live for a little bit just before 9 o'clock. So if you are interested in that, stay tuned, I'll wait for that. But now we're going to be talking about council tax. Could you believe it? In April this year, around 3/4 of us will see our council tax rate increasing.
Well, if you're already burdened by the cost of living, you could now have an extra 100 quid added to your bills per year in your council tax. This is the founder of an organisation called Fair Share. It's a council tax campaign group, and he is Andrew Dixon. Andrew, what can I say? Costs are going up for everybody, including local authorities, but 5% on what we pay.
Yeah, it's damning. It's a very difficult time for households, and I think we've got to put this in context. We've obviously had the global financial crisis. We had a period where taxes went up. We've seen rising inflation. We've obviously had to deal with the pandemic. It's a very challenging time for households, and a 5% increase in council tax is really very difficult.
And this comes just before the elections in May. Will people be able to vote at the ballot box to try and reduce that, or is this just a given? It's 5% irrespective of which party's running your council?
Absolutely. The Chancellor enabled councils and local authorities to increase that tax by 5%.
Who are the bad boys in all of this? I mean, naturally, people will turn their venom towards their local council. What do we get for this sort of money? But, central government have to bear a big responsibility on all of this. A lot of it, funding for local authorities, a lot of it's smoke and mirrors, is it not?
Absolutely, completely agree. And I think local authorities provide really important services So a lot of people, for example, think that local authorities are really just in charge of removing the waste bins, for example. But actually, local authorities provide really, really important services. So, for example, police, fire brigade, and also social care, which is a really important...
Well, that's a huge burden for them.
But some of those things you say,
providing.
why are they providing for, say, social care?
Absolutely. And, you know, we're a ageing population. That cost is increasing year on year. It's something like 50% of council tax goes to pay for social care.
You're kidding me.
Yeah. And
See, why I look at that and I think, why is that not just all part of our national insurance or what the National Health Service
Well, our
is
national
supposed
insurance
to do?
was supposed to be targeted. That was a Boris intervention, wasn't it, which got scrapped, which was to try and pay for the social care, but they obviously decided to keep it under the jurisdiction of local authorities. Just explain, because it's unbelievable to think how many of our councils up and down the country are actually in dire straits financially. We've recently seen one in Essex, I think, go bankrupt. We had one in Croydon that's gone bankrupt twice, I think, in a few years.
That's right.
So they have to increase taxes, because otherwise they're just going to have to be underwritten by the government.
Yeah, absolutely. You're spot on. And I think, again, we've got to put this in context. Council tax was introduced 1991 property values. Since then, we've seen property prices increase up and down the country at different rates. Obviously, the southeast and London has done particularly well. Other parts of the country in the regions, Hartlepool, Blackpool, etc., have not seen such increases. So now local authorities are having to fund these really important services off the back of modest house prices. So what does this mean for households? Someone in Bolton or Blackpool, they might pay 1 to 2% of their property value in tax, in council tax each year. Whereas, say, someone in Westminster or Kensington might be paying 0.1%, 0.2%, so it's very, very different. And I think it's out of date, it doesn't work, it's unfair. And I think the great British public don't mind paying tax as long as it's fair and it's understandable.
Well, that's your fairer share. How can you even that? What would you propose?
So we're very much building on the work of great organisations like the IFS, the IPPR Bright Blue, Resolution Foundation, who all advocate a proportional property tax. So we scrap council tax, we scrap stamp duty. I would include stamp duty in this because stamp duty is not helpful. It hinders mobility, people moving house. They've got to pay this huge tax bill, which doesn't help people moving up the property ladder, doesn't help people who are downsizing. So I would scrap both, and I would introduce a proportional property tax, which is 0.48% of the property value per year, the up-to-date value of the property. And the benefits are very real. So, for example, 77% of households would see a tax cut. The average tax cut would be over £550 per year. And most of these benefits would be in the regions outside of London and the South East.
But we keep hearing from the government we can't afford tax cuts. And I know that there's been lots of discussion. Let's reform the tax system but not make tax cuts. But if this is bringing in less revenue for the Treasury, it's not going to wash, is it?
Great question. Actually, our policy is revenue neutral. So overall, it is revenue neutral. And we fund this through a surcharge rate of 0.96% on foreign property owners in London and those who are fortunate enough to own weekend homes, holiday retreats, etc. So overall, the policy is revenue neutral, because I completely agree with you. There is no room for tax cuts. But I think there is reform for very poorly structured taxes, of which council tax is one.
I'm going to be very controversial here. People might hate me or think I'm stupid for this, but I think the aesthetics of a local area are very, very important, right? So the fact is, if there's graffiti, if there's boarded up shops, why can't there be more roundabouts that have flowers on them, hanging baskets in the street centre? Now, people can say, oh, there's more important things to spend money on. There may well be, but I think it lifts people's mood. It gives them respect for their area.
It's the first thing a head teacher will do in a deprived school when they want to turn the school round, sort out the uniform, instill pride in that school, and then you see the results.
Well, you see, that's a controversial. I would tend to agree with you.
There you go.
I went to school. I was a council house boy. I went to grammar school. We had to adhere to the uniform thing. But all I get now is people saying, well, we can't afford the official shoes. We can't. Well, neither could my parents, but we did. We did in some way. But standards, it's about standards, about giving people a pride. I think if you have a stake in your local community, you care about it and you want things to happen and to work. But again, that means something else is not getting it. But then I would love to look at a council's outgoings and put and say, you're paying what? What's that for? Get rid of that, forget that. I'd love to. But, you know, everybody wants their share of the cake, but there's only so much cake to go around.
I do. I feel local government provides great services, and I salute councillors and people who work in local government. It's a very challenging job, particularly when you've got rising costs.
Yeah.
So they've got to provide a great service, whether it be in social care, the fire brigade, the police, parks, aesthetics, etc., and they've got to deal with rising costs in the form of inflation. I think it's a very difficult time, and the government are very much making it very problematic for them.
I always look back and I think the Victorians or the Edwardians, we have so much to thank them for. Because, you know, I mean, Belfast's a great example, Glasgow's a great example, Birmingham's a great example. You look at parks, public areas, which were put there by either philanthropists or, you know, local authorities at the time of Queen Victoria and King Edward and whatever. But that isn't invested in now. No one turns around and says in a town, and we're going to create a big park here, a lovely tree-lined area with a bandstand and a pond and swans,
gorgeous,
and all that, and railings and things like that. What the hell happened? Where did it all go wrong? Yeah. Andrew Dixon, he is founder of Fairer Share, and he's a very interesting man to talk to about your council tax. You're going to be facing another 100 quid probably a year on your council tax. It's going up by 5% almost everywhere.
That's what we need.
Andrew, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Come back and talk to us again.
We'd love to. We'd love to. It's a really important issue, and I really salute you for bringing this, highlighting this agenda. We have a number of MPs who support our work. There's a lot we need to do. I think it's very popular as well. Wins votes at the.
What colour politicians?
Both.
Oh, really?
Both. If Labour or the Conservative Party were to back this would be very popular because 77% of households would see a tax cut. It's fair.
Vote winner.
Absolutely makes sense.
But you see, this is the sort of politics. This is a real issue affecting real people, and there's a lot of rubbish we sit and talk about and we hypothesise about and whatever, which doesn't affect people's lives, and it's in a Westminster bubble. This is what it's all about. What happens in your area, what you're paying your council tax for, and what you should be paying it for. Andrew, we could go on all day, but we can't. We're out of time. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
At the time is 6:19. Let's bring you up to date with the top stories this hour. And Ukraine will top the news agenda. The Defence Secretary Ben Wallace is meeting his NATO counterparts at a meeting in Brussels. It comes after President Zelensky toured London, Paris and Brussels last week in an effort to secure fighter planes for his country.
More than 41,000 people are known to have died in the earthquakes in Turkey and northern Syria last week. Rescue workers are continuing to find survivors, unbelievably. Last night, a 77-year-old man was pulled from the rubble alive after being trapped there for more than 8 days.
London is the world's slowest city to drive in, says new research by TomTom. In 2022, it took an average of 36 minutes and 20 seconds to travel 6.2 miles in the centre of the capital. Don't we know it?
Don't we know it? You don't have to tell us. You don't have to tell us.
Really good thing about getting up at 3 in the morning. There's no traffic.
No traffic.
Fly into work in the
Right.
morning. Forever
Now,
to get home.
here's a breaking news story.
Oh, yeah?
A man who stole, on Saturday, 200,000 Cadbury's Creme Eggs is facing 2 years in jail. I mean, what a ridiculous situation. So, I mean, it wasn't as if it's the Brinks mat robbery or anything, is it? But the prosecutors are saying about him that this was not a spur of the moment theft. There had been significant planning. So basically, he broke into an industrial unit, he stole the eggs and other varieties of chocolate, but then, of course, the police caught up with them northbound on the M42 with that.
Was the robbery foiled?
What do you get for them? Cadbury's Creme Eggs
They're wrapped in foil.
But they got smaller, haven't
But you know what? Maybe he just, there's an advert in there, isn't there? He just had to have them. You know, how do you do yours? I steal them.
Steal them. But why are the authorities so incensed that 31,000 quid's worth of cream eggs were stolen?
31,000 quid, is that what they were? Yeah.
Well, that's the amount that he took, 200,000 off them. You know, I sort of go, people who drive the wrong way up motorways and, you know, joyriders and all sorts of things, they don't face 2 years in jail.
No, you're right. The sentencing in this country is sometimes so bizarre. People who've got dodgy child porn on their phones or whatever get community service, and then Cadbury Creme Eggs theft.
I mean, so I would have
seriously.
offloaded those. You'd have gone to the pub, you'd have turned up the pub on a Friday night and someone says, Fancy a few cream eggs? I can do you a deal on them.
Yeah.
No, a
So
box.
you'd like to work on the council and sort out all the waste. I'd like to get in a court and sort out sentencing.
Yeah.
Lock them up.
Yeah.
That's what I'd
But
do.
you wouldn't lock him
Well,
up, would you?
No, but the proper criminals.
Yeah.
This guy just put too many eggs in one basket.
That's what he did. Cadbury's Creme Eggs. He's been remanded in custody. He's due to appear at Shrewsbury Crown Court on the 14th of March for sentencing.
Let him off.
Let him off. It's Easter.
It's Easter after all.
It's going to be Lent
it's
soon.
the season of forgiveness.
Yeah.
There we go. Let us know your thoughts.
We'll take a break then. After that, we'll bring you a GB News exclusive on new tactics being used by people smugglers to evade the French police.
First of all, though, here's your Wednesday forecast.
Hello there, very good morning to you. I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your latest weather updates from the Met Office. It is a bit of a split picture as we start off first thing this morning. Areas in the east are relatively fine and settled thanks to high pressure still staying in charge. But further to the west, we do have some weather fronts that are pushing their way in. And with a squeeze in the isobars here, the wind is also picking up. Gales around some coastal areas of Scotland and through that North Channel. The breeze will also pick up across England and Wales, and that will help clear the fog this morning. Meanwhile, we'll be watching this band of rain push its way in. Whilst it could be heavy to begin with, it will tend to fizzle its way out as it moves further eastward. So most of England and Wales only really seeing some patchy light outbreaks of rain. And actually the far southeast of England, once the fog has cleared off, will be relatively fine and dry and mild, reaching highs of 14 to 15 degrees Celsius. But just that bit cooler further west underneath that cloud and with the breeze. That band of rain will continue to decay away throughout this evening, and then our attention turns to this more expansive area of rain moving in from the west. That will push its way in across much of Northern Ireland and then England and Wales throughout the night. That's going to hold the temperatures up quite markedly. Many may not drop much below 6 degrees Celsius. We'll just be that bit cooler further to the north where we hold on to some slightly clearer skies. And throughout Thursday, northern areas of Scotland are likely to see the best conditions, really, with the best of the sunshine. Further south, that cloud is going to persist and we could see some drizzle on and off throughout the day, so it will be fairly grey and drab. Despite that, the winds are still coming up from a westerly-southwesterly direction, so it is going to be mild for the time of year, between 10-14 degrees Celsius, but not necessarily feeling as pleasant compared to some recent days where we've had that sunshine. Some particularly strong winds are possible Thursday night into the start of Friday across the northern half of the UK, so do keep up to date with the forecast on that. Enjoy your day.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nah, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Britain's maritime rescue services are being warned they are likely to see migrant boat crossings over a much wider stretch off the southern coastline.
Yes, GB News can reveal people smugglers are increasingly launching small boats much further south along the French coast to try to avoid more robust police patrols around Calais and Dunkirk.
Well, our Home and Security editor, Mark White, has this exclusive report.
Racing out from the French coast, a local lifeboat crew responding to reports of a small migrant boat in difficulties. But this incident, also involving a French border patrol vessel, is far away from the usual small boat routes out of Dunkirk and Calais. In fact, we're south of Boulogne, more than 50 miles from those routes. It's one of dozens of rescues the lifeboat based in Berck has attended in recent months, a major uptick in activity as people smugglers attempt to avoid increasing police patrols further north.
The numbers have been rising. At the end of 2021, we were involved in many migrant rescues. During 2022, there were significantly more migrants. The further they have to travel by boat, the higher the risks. Travelling from down the coast brings extra dangers. Being in the water for longer brings the danger of hypothermia and even being hit by bigger boats.
For the people smugglers, increased police activity around Dunkirk and Calais has made their regular launch points more difficult to operate from. French authorities are also busy erecting miles of extra security fencing around those beaches, and that's driving the small boats further south. For years, the criminal gangs have predominantly used the shortest route to the UK, pushing off first from the beaches around Calais, then expanding to include areas near Dunkirk. While occasional boats have been launched further south, in the past 6 months, this route, using beaches near Boulogne, has seen a significant spike in activity, with a beach even further south near Fort Man also now regularly being used. And for maritime patrols in UK waters, that means a far greater likelihood that small boats will begin showing up on a much longer stretch of UK coastline in the year ahead. It'll mean rescue teams across a wider area being called out more regularly to boats that have been in the water for many hours.
It does put a lot of pressure on the resources. You know, these boats are constructed for one purpose, to shift mass numbers of people, but they're designed, and constructed very poorly. They're not expected to be standing up to any real sea conditions, the amount of people that they are loaded with. So by crossing from further south and spending longer at sea, every second that they're at sea longer than they need to be is just going to increase that risk and that chance of another disaster.
There's little doubt, say maritime rescue experts, that those making small boat crossings from further down the French coast will be at far greater risk, with predictions that up to 80,000 people could attempt to cross in the year ahead. Authorities on both sides of the channel will be stretched to the limit. Mark White, GB News.
31 minutes past 6. We will take a break there. After that, going through the papers, Patsy Stevenson and Michael Portillo.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Click that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
And let's bring you up to date with the front pages before we review the papers. We begin with the Times.
Yeah, it is focusing very much on the Labour Party. So Keir Starmer's written inside the paper, he's telling those that oppose his anti-Semitism reforms to leave.
Telegraph covers the efforts by the government to crack down on sick notes at work. This is a good story, which I think we should talk about today.
It's on the list.
Get people back into the workplace. Too many of them throw in a sickie too easily.
Take a look at this one. A glove featuring on the front of The Sun. It is believed to be, or possibly could be, belonging to Nicola Bulley. They've been handed a stained glove found where she was last seen.
And the Mail does this bit about the Queen Consort's crown. She will wear a crown without the controversial Koh-i-Noor diamond, which doesn't really solve the problem because, I mean, so India's complaint is that Britain stole the Koh-i-Noor diamond. So rather than stick it in the crown or where it should be, they just simply take it out, but we've still stolen it.
I mean, there's pages and pages of
any.
it inside all the papers. And apparently there's 4 countries that have a claim to this diamond. So I think they've done the right thing by swerving it, put it that way.
Yeah, but it doesn't solve the problem.
Maybe
you either
not.
stole it or you
back.
didn't steal it, didn't you? Right, let's get the views.
Well, we were talking about that, yes. Go on, you were reading.
No, after you.
No, do you know what? I was just miles away looking that we've chosen that story, so we will be talking about it with the former Defence Secretary, Michael Portillo, and we're also joined this morning by the activist, Patsy Stevenson.
Very good
morning.
to see both.
Good morning.
Thank you. Good morning.
Right, Michael. So we're going to begin with the Mail. Britain should worry more about Chinese CCTV cameras than spy balloons.
Yes, this is a report from Professor Fraser Sampson, who is apparently the surveillance czar. And he says that police forces have been very careless about installing Chinese-made equipment. So this is from firms like Hikvision and Huawei. And it's things like security cameras, it's number plate recognition, it's drones. Now, why would this be significant? Well, supposedly the Chinese will be able to collect various sorts of information, but I think more importantly, there is a fear that they might be able to paralyse police forces in the event of hostilities. Well, the answer is to not use Chinese equipment. But since these people are so very heavily invested in Chinese equipment at this stage, you know, taking it out and replacing it is more difficult than taking out a diamond from a crown.
Yeah, we've kind of gone so far down a path, haven't we? We're in very...
Oh, I'm watching a series on BBC at the minute called The Capture, and it's about deep fake photography with CCTV cameras. So basically, Michael, they could have you and they have a bit of you in CCTV, but they can dupe your face on a different body. So a different body can act out something that you didn't do.
Yes.
But in court, it looked as if you did it.
Yeah, that's pretty worrying, isn't it?
Pretty worrying if that's true. Do you worry, Patsy, about who's watching you or what's watching your surveillance, or bearing in mind, you know, your whole thing about women's safety? Would you like maybe to see more cameras around?
I mean, you'd think, wouldn't you? You think, like, women maybe would want more CCTV, and sometimes that's the case, but in other aspects, I know a lot of people that say that the police are actually watching a lot of the activists. And we don't really like that. So it depends in what context, I guess.
It's quite interesting to me that whether you're watching, crime fiction on television or whether you're looking at police investigations that are real, CCTV seems to be the main tool that the police use. More than any other investigatory tool, it is CCTV. And in the case now of this poor lady, Miss Booley, has disappeared. There seems to be, a black spot where there wasn't CCTV, and the police seem to be unable to solve the issue. So they rely on it absolutely fundamentally.
Oh, the development of doorbell cameras and also
Yes.
windscreen cameras have also been hugely helpful for police investigations, haven't they, in recent years? And I don't know, we have a doorbell camera. I love it. I love being able to survey the comings and goings and, just feel a bit safer from that. Patsy, should we talk about the story then, front of the Telegraph? The government absolutely desperate to get people back into work. What is this latest idea?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's after, the pandemic, a lot of people work from home. And, I mean, in my opinion, and a lot of people that I know, it's very good to have working from home because it makes work accessible for a lot more people. If you've got a disability or you can't come in for some reason, I know, for example, if I've got a mental health day, I'd rather just work from home rather than have to come into work or need to take off a sick day.
But we should stress that this is talking about people who aren't in paid employment, because people working from home are in paid employment, they're just not necessarily in the office.
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, doctors are being told to sign fewer people off work with sick notes just to help them stay in employment. They say that sometimes, work helps with mental health as well. So that's what they're saying is, in this
Patsy,
thing.
I'm fascinated. You say, if I have a mental health day, how do you get a mental health day? You have to have a doctor on board, you have to have your employers on board with this as well. So tell me, what constitutes a mental health day?
So for me in the past, when I've worked at a bank, for example, I was working every day, and sometimes it may be that you've got a day where you just can't get out of bed or something happens. So I would call up my employer, and usually if you're working for a very good employer, they would say, OK, well, if you need to take a mental health day, that's OK. And now I'm not talking about people that use this as a way to get off work. Do you know what I mean? It's a real, if you've got something
How
going
many
on,
mental health days would you be allowed in a year, do you think?
It depends on what you have, because I have borderline personality disorder, so I was allowed a certain amount of mental health days. Other people are diagnosed with other things. Okay. It could just be that you just have a mental health.
Whereas for you, Eamonn, you spoke quite a lot about how you had a period of time off work, not talking about mental health, but for you, work was medicine, and you really wanted to come back to work because you felt it was going to help you.
Well, I couldn't see how I was going to improve sitting in my armchair watching Michael Portillo go on a train going around the world, however nice and pleasant that was.
This headline could have been any time from the last 40 years, in my view. When I was back in government, we were worried about this issue of that it was too easy to get a sick note from the doctor because your doctor is under a lot of pressure. If you go to the doctor and you say, look, I don't think I'm fit to go to work, how long is the doctor going to spend arguing with you? That the doctor's not terribly interested in helping the agenda of the government, which is to keep the economy growing, and the doctor wants to maintain a relationship with the patient. So the doctor is under a lot of, psychological pressure to say to the patient, yes, here's your certificate, and the government is trying to find ways around that. I agree the pandemic will have made it worse, but it is an issue that's been there for decades.
Yeah. And the thing is, I suppose when people go to statutory sick pay, they're not going... I haven't touched that mic.
You need a drink, there you go.
I don't like early mornings.
No, it's not easy. I want to talk about British troops, Michael. This is the front of the Express, this interesting meeting we've been talking about. Ben Wallace flying off to Brussels to meet his NATO counterparts. Lots of questions about whether or not we are in the position we need to be when we've got dangerous leaders like Putin not far off.
Well, on the whole, the press today is pretty pessimistic about British defence. There are lots of stories about NATO allies being critical of Britain, that we've run down our forces too much, that we're not capable, that we've exposed ourselves, for example, with this question of whether we should send aircraft to Ukraine because we're not really ready so to do. Contrasting with that, the Daily Express has a sort of upbeat story. This is about a NATO rapid response force. So this is a force which has been constituted in the past. It could consist of 40,000 soldiers. It might be up as far as 300,000. And these would be the people who would be the first response forces if a NATO ally were attacked by Russia. So Ukraine, of course, is not a NATO ally. So we're talking about countries that border Ukraine, countries that border Russia. And the commander of that, at least from next year, I think later this year, is Lieutenant Colonel Ben Hawes. He is British, and he is saying that the British contribution to this is absolutely, pucker and 100% and very, very good. I tend to believe this, actually. I mean, I think the problem that the British forces have is that they are very, very small, but much of what we have is probably pretty good. And I think that might be particularly true of the army, that much of what we have. But, the army is about half the size of what it was when I was Secretary of State for Defence. We're down to, I think, 18 surface ships in the Royal Navy. We used to have 900 tanks, now we have 148. And when you see that, Russia is losing scores of armoured vehicles in a day, you think to yourself, my goodness, 148 tanks is our total capability.
Yeah.
Just on that, just as a former Defence Secretary, do you think we should be supplying the fighter jets to Zelensky that he's calling for?
I would say ideally, but I think it's going to be extremely difficult. Extremely difficult because we deplete our own resources. Extremely difficult because I don't think the jets are ready. And then on top of that, all the problems of training the pilots and the maintenance crews who would be necessary for the aircraft. So a whole series of difficulties. So I say it's desirable, but I think practically extremely difficult.
Patsy, let's look at another. You've chosen the Metro here, and it simply asks the question, was it a hate crime front page of the Metro? But we're referring to the 16-year-old girl, Brianna Gay, stabbed to death in Warrington on Saturday. So what's the issue now?
Yeah, so, I mean, at the moment, they're saying they are investigating. They've said previously there's no evidence to suggest that it was a hate crime, but they're basically saying to everyone, if you could not speculate at this time, which is understandable because when stuff like this goes on, if you're speculating, it just can cause a bit of havoc, especially when, the family needs to grieve and sometimes you just need to let them get on with what they're trying to do and find out, and they're trying to find out what's going on. So I think, for a lot of people, they do understand that it probably was a hate crime. I mean, she was transgender, so and it says as well that she was bullied for being transgender as well. We have no evidence of this yet, but I mean, it's probably very likely,
It's very odd what has happened to definitions in life. I mean, a teenager has been brutally murdered. There are 2 teenage suspects. That is hate. I mean, whatever the motive was. The most appalling thing has happened. And for us to be debating whether it was a hate crime seems to me completely mad.
It's a murder, and it's another knife crime.
A terrible, terrible, brutal, filled with hatred murder, whatever may have been the supposed motivation of the murderers.
I think it's that a lot of trans people are very fearful at the moment because of this. So it's like, for example, when a woman is murdered, a lot of women then fear, that sort of thing can happen. It's just a reminder that, trans people are hated in certain groups, and that's awful. And that's, it's very scary. It's a very scary time at the moment.
I mean, none of us know what's happened to Nicola Bulley. Whether we just don't know if she's fallen into that river, whether she's decided to take off or she's been abducted or whatever. But that, again, must be something that frightens so many women. A woman engaged in what was a daily, ordinary act, of putting her dog in the back of her car, driving her kids to school, of then walking the dog down the riverbank, making a few phone calls while she was doing that, listening to something on her iPods. The ordinariness of her and what she was doing and the mystery around all of this, very, very worrying.
Yeah, and that's what it is that, women are often saying, please understand that misogyny is a problem because misogyny leads to this. It leads to abuse. It leads to murder of women because that's where it starts from. It starts from misogyny and treating women as objects. So in that way, trans people are saying the same. The transphobic headlines and the transphobic media sometimes can push certain transphobic views that can lead to unfortunately murdered.
Although I would stress, there is no evidence
No.
of any
Doesn't
kind of
mean that
misogyny
it
in the
has.
Nicola Bulley case, because for all we know, she could have tripped and drowned. Can we talk about the crown that the Queen
crown,
Consort will be wearing, Michael? This is on the front of the Times. Have they done a bit of political sidestepping, or, as Eamonn says, it hasn't solved anything?
Well, I think it's solved something, but but not everything. So, first of all, she's not making a new crown. Previous queens have made new crowns, which would be seen as very extravagant. This is Queen Mary's crown, and they're going to take out the Kohinoor diamond. The Kohinoor diamond was acquired by Queen Victoria in 1849 when we annexed Punjab. So it is absolutely...
When you say acquired by her, what do you mean?
This is the absolute nub of it.
Look what they left behind.
We acquired Punjab and we acquired the diamond with it.
Right.
It's clearly an important part of the colonial story. I mean, of course, Britain was highly acquisitive at the time. The diamonds that are going to appear in the crown are the Cullinan diamonds, and they were mined in South Africa, probably in pretty dreadful conditions for the miners in South Africa. So we're not going to escape controversy. Some people are still going to point at this crown and say that it carries, as it were, colonial content. But I think the royal family is showing itself to be pretty sensitive, and I think that the Queen Consort, in particular Camilla, will think that she's made a very important gesture. As for the diamond itself, as you say, Eamonn, the diamond remains in Britain. It is claimed by Pakistan, by India, by Iran. I don't know whether you have yet another candidate.
Oh, have I made up for?
No. I mean, Britain would make it four anyway, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So it's not very clear to whom it should be returned. It was originally, I think, a Mughal diamond. So it had moved around the Mughal Empire.
Well, talking about theft, I just want to talk about the Cadbury's Creme Eggs.
Yes.
Because they, we hear reassuringly, they're in such a good condition, they can go back on the shelves.
Oh, thank goodness.
So although 200,000 Cadbury's Creme Eggs...
I was worried,
Yes, were swiped by this... egg genius who organised this heist on Saturday in Telford, they can go back on the shelves, so Easter can be saved. I mean, I still feel, was this genius stealing 200,000 Cadbury Creme Eggs, or is it the most hideous, villainous crime ever in the history of the world?
Well, it was certainly more than a yolk.
I'm loving all these excellent jokes this morning.
Yes, many of those.
I just quickly wanted to get Patsy's thoughts on this crown issue, because there have been commentators saying that actually the royal family have gone woke, that by worrying about this, they've got these diamonds in their jewellery cabinets, they should just wear them. Do you think that they should be giving them back? What's your view?
I mean, yeah, of course, I feel like they should give them back because I think, acquired is a very strange word for stolen, in my opinion. But I think at this point, the royal family, anyone who is, I guess, as people would call woke on the left or something like that, they don't really follow the royal family anyway. So, they're going to do what they want to do. I would love it if they were more sensitive, but I don't think they will.
You don't think this is a sensitive move from them, though, in terms of changing the crown?
I mean, I understand, but I think personally the royal family could be more sensitive in general. But that's I have so many controversial opinions about the royal family that we could talk about it all day. So
well, maybe again in the next hour. We have to say goodbye to Michael Portillo and Patsy Stevenson for now. Thank you.
Oh no, here's another confectionery heist. Here it is. Sean Murphy, who's number 11 in the world rankings. He's a snooker player. He set aside a bit of his Terry's orange egg on the windowsill to keep it cool outside in the cold, and it was swiped by a seagull. Oh. If anybody recognises the perpetrator of this crime, I can report to the police.
I do hate seagulls.
There you are. Well, they like Terry's orange eggs.
Michael, Patsy, thank you both. We'll see you again just after 7:30.
News-wise, let's bring you up to date with what's happening. Ukraine will top the agenda today at a meeting in Brussels. The Defence Secretary Ben Wallace will be there, and his NATO counterparts. It comes after President Zelensky toured London, Paris and Brussels in an effort to secure fighter planes.
2 people have been arrested on suspicion of sending malicious messages to wire council members over missing mum of 2, Nicola Bulley. Lancashire police say a 49-year-old man and a 20-year-old woman have been arrested. The man's been bailed pending further inquiries while the woman remains in custody.
School unions are warning the Education Secretary must make teachers a concrete pay offer to prevent further strikes going ahead. Gillian Keegan will meet union leaders today in a bid to resolve the dispute.
Now, the cost of food is at the top of inflation tables. It's upward of 16% compared to this time last year.
As well as fuel costs, legislation designed to reduce carbon emissions are forcing farmers' costs even higher, and that price goes through to the shops.
Well, our reporter Doogie Beattie has been taking a look into it.
Farming has faced massive changes in the last 2 decades, and the most recent green thinking blames cattle for the harmful gases. Former Agricultural Minister for Northern Ireland, Edwin Poots, believes the evidence is not convincing.
I worked quite a bit on the whole environment thing as well as the agriculture side, and I was never convinced by the evidence that was produced that animals, cattle in particular, are the significant contributors to the whole climate change debate that others are claiming it to be. They engage in a circular system in that they eat grass, which captures carbon, so they emit methane, but then they eat the grass again that's already captured the carbon. So the cattle are involved in a circular system.
The Netherlands is globally recognised as a farming powerhouse, producing over 6% of EU food. This part of Holland is over 4.5 metres below sea level. It's renowned for its green and renewable policies. But farmers here believe that the government's newest restrictions on methane and nitrogen will drive up the price of dairy and put them out of business.
When I have to cut back my herd by 10%, my income will go down 10% or more. You know, because when you go down with the herd, your production is going down, so your cost price is getting up, probably sometimes double.
Jeroen van Manneren says Dutch farming practices are amongst the best, and importing from far off shores could bring problems.
So we're actually producing on the highest standard available in the world. When you cut down farming up here, it will come back in countries like Brazil. First of it, they have to kill nature for it, and it's actually original nature which was not created by men. So we're just moving production from high standard countries in Europe to low standard countries all around the globe. So for every cow which we cull in Holland, there's coming 3 cows back in Brazil. But right up there, you know, they don't look at animal welfare, they don't look at the use of antibiotics, they don't look at the use of hormones, they don't look at pollution from the environment. So what we win up here, you know, it's coming back 4 times in Brazil. So we're just moving and expanding the problem.
The Republic of Ireland are now looking at ways to reduce their herds, and British farmers fear the same or similar may happen in the UK, further reducing homegrown food supply and increasing reliance on cheaper global food imports. Doogie Beattie, GB News, Holland.
Like, this is a massive thing, particularly for countries like Ireland, where so much dairy produce, milk and cheese and all that sort of thing. And incidentally, Holland, which you know quite well, they're implementing this. They're killing out cows. They don't want cows there at all. But what are farmers to do? They try to diversify, as you will see on Clarkson's farm if you watch that. And the local planners, they don't like that. They don't like that. How do farmers survive?
It's very difficult. And so much of our countryside is built around farms, and if we get rid of all of our farms, what will happen to our countryside? Really interesting debates and discussions this morning. Let us know your thoughts on all of them. And after this break and the forecast, we'll have all the latest inflation figures. See you in a moment.
Hello there, very good morning to you. I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your latest weather updates from the Met Office.
It is a bit of a split picture as we start off first thing this morning. Areas in the east are relatively fine and settled thanks to high pressure still staying in charge. But further to the west, we do have some weather fronts that are pushing their way in. And with a squeeze in the isobars here, the wind is also picking up. Gales around some coastal areas of Scotland and through that North Channel. The breeze will also pick up across England and Wales, and that will help clear the fog this morning. Meanwhile, we'll be watching this band of rain push its way in. Whilst it could be heavy to begin with, it will tend to fizzle its way out as it moves further eastward. So most of England and Wales only really seeing some patchy light outbreaks of rain. And actually the far southeast of England, once the fog has cleared off, will be relatively fine and dry and mild, reaching highs of 14 to 15 degrees Celsius. But just that bit cooler further west underneath that cloud and with the breeze. That band of rain will continue to decay away throughout this evening, and then our attention turns to this more expansive area of rain moving in from the west. That will push its way in across much of Northern Ireland and then England and Wales throughout the night. That's going to hold the temperatures up quite markedly. Many may not drop much below 6 degrees Celsius. We'll just be that bit cooler further to the north, where we hold on to some slightly clearer skies. And throughout Thursday, northern areas of Scotland are likely to see the best conditions, really, with the best of the sunshine. Further south, that cloud is going to persist, and we could see some drizzle on and off throughout the day, so it will be fairly grey and drab. Despite that, the winds are still coming up from a westerly-southwesterly direction, so it is going to be mild for the time of year, between 10 and 14 degrees Celsius, but not necessarily feeling as pleasant compared to some recent days where we've had that sunshine. Some particularly strong winds are possible Thursday night into the start of Friday across the northern half of the UK, so do keep up to date with the forecast on that. Enjoy your day.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Inflation's expected to slow as the government fights to keep prices down.
Hello there, very good morning to you. Good to see you. It is 7 o'clock on this Wednesday, the 15th of February. You're tuned in to Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. The latest inflation data will be released in the next few moments, with the rate predicted to fall. The Prime Minister's vowed to try and cut inflation in half by the end of the year to try and ease the cost of living crisis.
The Equality Watchdog has announced that it will end its monitoring of the Labour Party 2 years after a damning report into its handling of anti-Semitism.
We'll bring you a GB News exclusive report on the people smugglers attempting to cross the Channel using a wider area of the southern coastline in an attempt to dodge French police patrols.
And Queen's Consort Camilla will wear Queen Mary's crown for the King's coronation, making her the first Queen in modern times not to have one made for her. The crown will be modified to remove the controversial Koh-i-Noor diamond, instead featuring gems honouring the late Queen.
Get in touch the usual ways via Twitter or email. Let us know where you're watching or listening from. We'd love to give you a shout out. And I have to say, inundated with cream egg emails already.
Yeah. Was the guy who stole the cream eggs, says Richie, doing it because some of them are special and worth a few grand? There is a cream egg promotion on at the moment. Oh, see what you mean, see what you mean. I reckon he could offload those easily in the pub on a Friday night, yeah. But Andrew, who has no sense of value as to how ingenious this crime was, said it is a horrific crime, and not one to be taken lightly. Oh, lighten up. 200,000 cream eggs, I reckon it's genius. It's genius.
Well, the good news is they can go back to the shops. They're in good enough condition that Easter does not need to be cancelled.
Yeah. Well, anyway. There we go. OK, get in touch.
So, the latest inflation figures have been released in the last few seconds, showing that inflation currently stands at 10.1%.
That's down from 10.5. Now, these figures give us an indication of the current state of Britain's finances, and so slightly down on last month.
Well, we have the global economic strategist at eToro, Ben Laidler, in the studio to give us some analysis to this. Look, down a little bit, not significantly, but still in double digits.
I guess we'll take it. This is the third straight decline, so that's the good news. But to your point, we're still in double digits. That leaves us pretty much the highest in the world, unfortunately, at least among the countries we would like to be compared to. And it's obviously 5 times what the Bank of England would like it to be. So that's the bad news. But I think clearly this is the third in a row. Inflation is going to keep declining. The question is just sort of how much. So it's a modest good news story.
OK. I wonder what you think is behind the slow decline. I mean, America yesterday released their figures down to 6.4%, but still higher than expected.
So they're a little bit ahead of us. That's their 7th decline, so we're following along behind. But we have a little bit the worst of both worlds. We have this energy crisis that Europe's been suffering, but we also have these very tight jobs market, which the US has also been suffering. We have a little bit of both. Energy prices have been coming down. I think that's behind quite a lot of this decline you've been seeing. And I think what the Bank of England particularly is going to be looking for in the next few months is this jobs market, which is unemployment at generational lows, which has obviously been helping a lot of people, but it's also a concern for the Bank of England that it is keeping inflation high.
I suppose that's why we keep seeing these headlines, like I think it's the front of the Telegraph, talking about trying to get people back to work. Today's approach is on sick notes. But I wonder, is that why we're being told by the Governor of the Bank of England there will be this sharp decline, perhaps from March onwards? I mean, I still don't really understand why it's at 10.1 this morning, but in a month's time, we're expecting it to be significantly down. What's going to change between now and then?
So these two big drivers, one is the energy price in all its forms. That's been coming down. Petrol prices are down 20%. Food prices have been important. They're also down 20%. The energy price, natural gas prices, which obviously heats our homes, but is also used by a lot of businesses, they're down 80%. But those are the wholesale prices. That's going to take a few months to feed through into what we actually pay in our bills. That's the lag, but it is coming, and then hopefully further out you get hopefully more people back to work. That softens up the labour market, and that's your sort of stage 2. That's where the Bank of England is saying maybe we get inflation down to 4% by the end of the year, which is obviously a long way from here.
OK, so depending on what is driving inflation and what you think is driving inflation, let's go to Dan Falvey, our head of digital news on this one, because yesterday you asked the GB News viewers and listeners a question. What was it, Dan?
Yes, so yesterday afternoon we put out a poll on Twitter asking our viewers to get in touch and let us know what do they think the biggest driver of inflation is. Now, out of that, we had 54% of the 7,711 people who got in touch said Brexit. Now, the funny thing about Twitter polls is, of course, they are open for everyone to get involved with, and as well as just our GB News viewers, I think we might have had some guest watchers as well who got involved. So it's really interesting hearing Ben talk about just how much of inflation is due to the energy prices, as well as other factors as well, and maybe shedding some light about how much the war in Ukraine may be paying a bit of that, not just Brexit.
Dan, a bit of politics in all of this, I suppose, because we keep hearing, it's one of Rishi Sunak's 5 stated aims to halve inflation by the end of the year. It's actually not the government's job to halve inflation or to do that. It's the Bank of England's job, isn't it? They're both going to be fighting over claiming credit for this when it seems to be it's a global factors anyway. Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because they were also fighting for who to blame a few months ago when inflation was going up. Now, you're right to say that inflation is a matter for the Bank of England, but the government will say that things such as being careful when it comes to giving pay rises to public sector workers has a big part to play in keeping control of inflation. So they'll be able to say that when it does go down, look, it's not justice, but we've played a big part of this, and that's why we need to stick with our plan and not give these inflation-busting pay rises that are being demanded by the unions. Ben, of course, we're all looking to the budget next month, and shortly after the budget, we then get the next interest rate decision. How will today's inflation figures, do you think, feed into all of this?
So the Bank of England's hiked interest rates 10 times already. Interest rates are at 4%. That's obviously, that's not news to anybody. That's painful for an awful lot of people. But I think the Bank of England is looking, at these numbers and preparing to ease back on those interest rate hikes. I think they feel they're getting close to what they need to do. Maybe one more hike, maybe a second hike, but smaller hikes, not the big hikes we've seen for the last couple of months. But then they're going to wait. They're going to wait and see whether we are going to come down from that 10% to the 4%, which is obviously much closer to their target by the end of the year. But, that's step one. Step one is we stop hiking. That's the relative good news story, here. They'll be scrutinising these numbers. 10.1% is a little bit better than we thought we were going to get this morning.
But the pain ain't going away, Ben, is it, for people who are looking at their bills?
Unfortunately not. This is it's a double-digit tax on everybody in this country, and it's certainly here for the next few months at least.
OK, thank you. Gentlemen, thank you both very much indeed. The time is 8 minutes past 7. Well, with inflation numbers still in double digits, as Ben was pointing out, those on low incomes and pensioners are amongst those currently feeling the squeeze the most due to increases in energy and food.
Well, our reporter Anna Riley visited the charity Age UK to see how they're helping older people in need.
An affordable meal and a place to keep warm is what Age UK are offering in centres like this. It's the elderly that are amongst the hardest hit by the rising costs of living. And this winter, Age UK have been helping older people by making sure they're accessing benefits, as well as delivering food to their door and providing home energy checks.
Older people are disproportionately affected by the cost of living crisis. They're on fixed incomes, so there isn't much flexibility for them. And also, a lot of them are immobile and so are affected by having less access to heat and less access to energy and warm food. So, it is very concerning for us, the devastating effect that that's having on them. And we're seeing a lot of people really, really distressed and worried about it. Phone calls for help have gone up, they've doubled really in the last few months. So very concerning for us.
The cafe at the Age UK Centre in Darlington provides a place for older people to socialise, as well as stay warm and fed.
They're getting out of the house, they're meeting people, they're getting fresh air, they're getting a reasonably priced meal, they don't have to worry that the heating's on. There's no time limit on how long they sit, and they're sitting and chatting to people. So yeah, they're not worrying about eating or heating.
For pensioners like Jennifer, the facilities here have been a lifeline.
Cost of living is impacting on me, and I don't know what's going to end. I don't know if the price is going to go down or they're going to still rise. So I feel uncertainty about that. Yeah, having a meal here at lunchtime, I feel comfortable. I feel safe. I feel that I'm being supported by the staff in the building. And for me, this particular Age UK outlet, Bradbury House, has been my lifesaver. They give me some hope.
Another day is done in the kitchen and cafe, but with prices at an all-time high, staff and volunteers are busier than ever here this winter. Anna Riley, GB News, Darlington.
Thank you for that, Anna. 7:10 is the time. Latest news is this.
Ukraine, top of the news agenda today. There's a meeting of defence ministers taking place in Europe. Ben Wallace, of course, will attend, meeting his NATO counterparts in Brussels later. This all comes just a week on from President Volodymyr Zelensky's tour of London, Paris and Brussels in an effort to secure fighter planes for his country.
More than 41,000 people are now known to have died in the earthquakes which struck southern Turkey and northern Syria last week. Rescue workers are continuing to find survivors. Last night, a 77-year-old man was pulled from the rubble alive after being trapped there for more than 8 days.
London is the world's slowest city to drive in, says new research, I'm so sorry, by TomTom. In 2022, it took an average of 36 minutes and 20 seconds to travel just 6.2 miles. Unbelievable. That's in the centre of the capital. It's gridlock out there. It's awful.
But that's partly to do with the design of London, or the lack of design of London. It's still got twisty, windy streets. It's not like being in New York or something where everything's straight lines.
Although is that not a bit gridlocky as well?
It is a bit gridlocky. I agree with you.
I think it's just these cities have exploded in terms of population. There's just not the infrastructure.
But then look what they're doing in Wales. They're not building any roads. They've decided that's it. We're not building any more roads. We're going to, or bridges. We're going to repair roads and things, but we're not going to encourage people to enjoy roads or like them, because it just leads to more people using them. So I don't know if you're watching us from Wales today, this impacts on you. Let us know what you think about all of this, because you have to say, business needs an infrastructure. They need good routes. They need, industrial estates on motorways, on the side, so that they can access big towns and cities and ports, airports and seaports and goodness knows what. But let us know what you think. Are Wales showing us, the rest of us, how to do it? Just don't build any more roads. But then that impacts on cars. I mean, we saw Ford announcing redundancies yesterday as well. Good thing, bad thing? Let us know.
After the break, Paul Coit is here. He's got all the big sports stories of the day, and that is after your Wednesday forecast.
Hello there, very good morning to you. I'm Jonathan Vaughtry here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. It is a bit of a split picture as we start off first thing this morning. Areas in the east are relatively fine and settled thanks to high pressure still staying in charge. But further to the west, we do have some weather fronts that are pushing their way in. And with a squeeze in the isobars here, the wind is also picking up. Gales around some coastal areas of Scotland and through that North Channel. The breeze will also pick up across England and Wales, and that will help clear the fog this morning. Meanwhile, we'll be watching this band of rain push its way in. Whilst it could be heavy to begin with, it will tend to fizzle its way out as it moves further eastward. So most of England and Wales only really seeing some patchy light outbreaks of rain. And actually the far southeast of England, once the fog has cleared off, will be relatively fine and dry and mild, reaching highs of 14 to 15 degrees Celsius. But just that bit cooler further west underneath that cloud and with the breeze. That band of rain will continue to decay away throughout this evening, and then our attention turns to this more expansive area of rain moving in from the west. That will push its way in across much of Northern Ireland and then England and Wales throughout the night. That's going to hold the temperatures up quite markedly. Many may not drop much below 6 degrees Celsius. We'll just be that bit cooler further to the north, where we hold on to some slightly clearer skies. And throughout Thursday, northern areas of Scotland are likely to see the best conditions, really, with the best of the sunshine. Further south, that cloud is going to persist, and we could see some drizzle on and off throughout the day, so it will be fairly grey and drab. Despite that, the winds are still coming up from a westerly-southwesterly direction, so it is going to be mild for the time of year, between 10 and 14 degrees Celsius, but not necessarily feeling as pleasant compared to some recent days where we've had that sunshine. Some particularly strong winds are possible Thursday night into the start of Friday across the northern half of the UK, so do keep up to date with the forecast on that. Enjoy your day.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even some ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Click that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one.
Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back. Still to come on the programme this morning. 8:20. We'll be finding out definitively what food items should go in the fridge and what should stay out. And yesterday we got asked by our team to take photographs of our fridge and send it in for analysis. I have to say, I felt like I was photographing my knicker drawer. I felt like it was very intimate. I was quite stressed out about how tidy and neat and beautiful my fridge looked, and I did tidy it a little bit.
Well, funny you should say that. You didn't photograph your knicker drawer, but we got your husband to do that. And
here it is. I don't think he'd be doing that. Anyway.
Do you know, but my attitude towards the fridge is just throw it all in.
Yeah, luckily Ruthie organises yours, so I've seen a picture of yours and it's
what makes you
There's
think?
no way. Look at your side of the desk. Look at my side of the desk. I can tell if the fridge was run by you, it'd be a mess.
You're so evil.
I'm so
You
right.
really are.
Oh, is that wrong?
No, my attitude is you just put everything in the fridge. Put it all in. Eggs, sauce, anything. Just put it in.
Put it in, yeah.
It's better off.
Oh no, I like my eggs out the fridge. Any fruit, especially strawberries, tomatoes, got to keep them out. They've zero flavour out the fridge.
Is that right?
Well, that's my opinion. I don't know if it's right. But...
Okay. And we'll be finding out if Britain stands a chance at the 2023 Sumo Wrestling Championships.
Apparently we're in with a chance of a gold. we're suddenly really good at this.
Big men like me, I would have made a good sumo
It
wrestler.
only lasts 6 minutes. It's not exactly, stamina sport. Anyway, 8:45, we're speaking to the president of the British Sumo Federation. They're on the up.
They require big nappies. It is like it's a big towel wrapped around.
Yeah? How would you feel about that?
I don't think I'd feel very comfortable about that. There we go.
Well.
It just reminded me of your knicker drawer.
Oh, thanks. Oh, Bridget Jones.
Anyway, get in touch. You know what to do. Back pages stack up like this today. Telegraph runs with the possible disruption of this weekend's Six Nations match between Wales and England after Welsh players threaten strike action. Paul Coyte's views on this next. Star leads with the crown jewel. League leaders Arsenal host second place Man City. This is one of the most anticipated games of the Premier League season. Crown jewel, they're calling it. And the Daily Mail focuses on San Siro after injury-ridden Spurs narrowly lost 1-0 to AC Milan in last night's Champions League game. Here is Paul. So, first of all, let's understand, we've got a Six Nations weekend coming up. It is Wales against England, but there's the possibility, and we'll find out later today, if Welsh rugby's going on strike.
Slight possibility. I think it's unlikely. I think it's very unlikely that we'll have the Six Nations featuring a Welsh strike because the Welsh Rugby Union is in turmoil at the moment. Everything that seems to be going wrong is going wrong. There's Steve Phillips, who's the chief executive, and it was made public recently then that during his tenure, there was sexism, there were misogyny claims, and the whole thing was a mess and dealt with very badly.
Why?
So we had that recently.
Why?
Why
Delilah.
What?
Why?
Why Delilah? That's the problem. Delilah is the other problem because they're not allowed to sing that either.
Yeah, not allowed to sing that.
It's all very well singing that, but yeah, I mean, there's that. There's also long-term pay deals between the Welsh Rugby Union, the 4 Welsh regions, which is then affecting players. And this is where we are at the moment, is that players are saying, look, we don't know where our contracts are. We want our contracts sorted out. We don't know at what point we are. We need to know where our future is because, and there are some players that haven't been named. They're saying, look, I'm depressed about this. We're having sleepless nights. We can't actually carry on. We don't know whether we're going to have a job at the end of this. So really, it's a whole melting pot of a disaster which is going on at the Welsh Rugby Union at the moment. And this needs to be sorted out, and that's where the strike seems to be heading.
What did you make your team Spurs last night in Milan?
Not too much to worry about, I think.
1-0 defeat.
1-0 is OK. It's 2 legs. It's still 3 weeks away until the home leg. I mean, if you play in the Champions League, and as you know, if you play in any 2-leg match, you want to be at home for the second one, which is where Spurs are going to be. They're going to be under the lights, or the famous all-white strip. The crowd is going to be behind them as well. And, the old adage about the 12th man, it makes a huge difference. So I think to come away from the San Siro, and I didn't think AC Milan were that great. Spurs were OK. Not really too much to report apart from the fact, they lost 1-0, but it's all about the second leg, so that's coming up. So I think that's nothing too much to worry about.
In the Premier League tonight, the kick-off's at 7:30. Number 1 against number 2. It's Arsenal against Man City.
That's going to be huge, though, isn't it, that one? Arsenal, who look like there could be a wobble. We've got Manchester City, who perennially, they seem to come up on just basically on the rails right towards the end and then have a great run. Now, this is the time to do it. If they manage to beat Arsenal, that puts them level on points, although they will go top on goal difference. Arsenal still have a game in hand, but I almost feel that all the stuff that we've heard about the Premier League charging Manchester City, as bad as it is for the club and as upset as everybody is, it's the sort of thing that would play into Pep Guardiola's hands to say, listen, everybody hates us, everybody's against us, this is where we now have to push on. And I have a feeling that they will do. Arsenal, Mikel Arteta really upset about VAR decisions. He talked about that as well yesterday. So it's set for a really fantastic game.
Yeah, set for Man U to take advantage of it all.
You know what? Only 3 points away.
We'd set for a 0-0 draw there.
So you'll take that and then talk about coming up on the rails, get a good run together. Who knows what's going to happen?
Who knows?
Who knows?
Hey, what about Jesse Marsh? He got the Southampton job.
Well, not actually definitely yet, but it looks pretty much like it's going to happen. I mean, it's pretty much set that he is going to take over. We talked about that yesterday.
Yeah.
Disaster at Leeds.
Yeah.
Hasn't worked out. So what do? You walk into another Premier League job. I mean, if this one doesn't work, then he will be done. There won't be anything else after that.
Look, let's talk about this report that was published yesterday, which found that the French police and UEFA very much responsible for the chaotic scenes, the awful scenes at the Champions League final last year against Liverpool supporters.
Yeah, UEFA, it was a surprise to me the fact they did apologise, because it seemed after the Champions League final and the way that supporters were treated, we know the fact that they blamed Liverpool fans for not having tickets, which was nonsense. Liverpool fans were tear-gassed, which was also a disgrace, because these are fans that are behaving. And one of the things in the report that I found more amazing and distressful than anything else is that UEFA were handling things because they looked at Hillsborough and completely wrongly looked at Hillsborough from over 30 years ago and said, right, this is trouble, this is the way we've got to handle these fans. So, I mean, the whole thing was a disgrace from start to finish. It looks like that UEFA have now said, look, we're sorry about this, we've apologised to Liverpool fans. There are Liverpool fans now are thinking we can sort legal action against it, but it's something that should never happen again. But the other thing also, which really worries me, is that I've been abroad and seen football. I've seen football in Spain. I've seen English teams play there. The way that English fans are handled is not good. It happens in Italy. A lot of it isn't reported. I've seen it where you've had security or even police with batons. You get bottlenecks with people just being funneled into these grounds, and then you can feel the tension building up. And it's not surprising that we're seeing stuff like this because they're just handled.
Something's got to change, and maybe heads will roll at UEFA.
Well, I should have hoped so, because it was just handled so badly, and it was all so very quick to point the finger. They even had signs on in the ground saying, we're delayed by 40 minutes because of fans turning up late for the match. They blame them even that early. So it's just thinking, well, this is very easy for us to do. There's problems going on. We'll blame the English fans, and then we'll move on. But it hasn't washed this time.
Okay,
which is good.
Thank you very much indeed. There we go. That's a roundup of what's happening sports-wise with Paul Coit.
After the break, we'll go through the papers. We're joined again by Michael Portillo, and Patsy Stevenson will be just a few minutes.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back.
Eamonn Holmes back on the TV
Surprised
with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh yes,
Oh, good.
already to bless.
Oh, Eamonn.
Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamonn Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Just after 7:30. Front pages, how do they stack up, Isabel?
Here's the Times. It's focusing on the Labour Party. Sir Keir Starmer telling those that opposes anti-Semitism reforms to leave. He's doing a big speech on it just after 9 o'clock this morning, which we'll take live here on GB News.
And the Telegraph up next, covering the efforts by the government to crack down on sick notes at work. So doctors are told to sign off fewer people under proposals to reinvigorate the economy. So we'll have more people at work, but they'll all be coughing and in fevers.
Maybe. Well, yeah, it all ties into inflation figures today, doesn't it? Here's The Sun. It's leading with the search for Nicola Bulley. They're photographing this missing glove that has been found. Police have been handed a stained glove. It was retrieved from the place where she was last seen.
And the Mail, all this business about the Queen Consort's crown. She opts to go without the controversial Koh-i-Noor diamond.
So it's time to go through the papers now. Joining us for that is the former Defence Secretary, Michael Portello, and activist Patsy Stevenson. Welcome back. I had an email saying, what sort of activist would you say you are? What does that mean? It's such a general term. How would we define that?
I call myself a women's rights activist.
A women's rights activist, fair enough.
But I mean, it's...
well, let's start with you on a women's issue, shall we? This is on the front of the Eye this morning. The postcode lottery facing women who need hormone replacement therapy.
Yeah, so it's saying that female patients living in poor areas are less likely to be prescribed hormone replacement therapy because of the widespread shortage. So, I mean, many people know it as HRT. You know, I know loads of people that are on it, and I think it comes down to, what they said it comes down to, is that a lot of people don't have education around the menopause in general. A lot of women think that it's just a natural thing, the menopause, you get hot flushes, that's about it. But actually it causes joint pain, it causes like eye dryness, a whole number of different things.
Yeah, Patsy, but is that the woman or the patient's responsibility, or is that the doctor's responsibility? It's not up for you to go and say, this is what's wrong with me, I want this. Surely a doctor should be able to prescribe that, and that's the responsibility.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is too, but I think a lot of the time doctors don't necessarily treat female patients in the same way that they should as a male patient. I know it sounds like...
No, I saw a report yesterday. There was a double-page spread in the Daily Mail, and it was saying that women's pain is treated less seriously than a man's pain. So if a man says he's got pain, a doctor believes him, whereas a woman says she's got pain.
So many reasons that must feed into that. For example, men are very reluctant to come forward, so perhaps the point that a man presents with pain, it is more...
Yes.
That makes more sense.
Exactly, you're tough, aren't
really
you?
Serious. Yes. I mean,
but also, on this, Patsy, I mean, it says patients living in poor areas are less likely to be prescribed that. But is this because actually they're not coming forward saying they're not feeling well? Because, as you say, in deprived areas, perhaps they may not have the realisation of what it is.
I mean,
or is this to do with doctors, you know, being tight in poorer areas?
It could be either one. I think, to be honest, one of the main reasons, I think, is because of education. Like, in schools, I was never taught about the menopause. I never even heard that word until I got sort of in my mid-20s maybe, and I think they should be teaching it as part of health class, you know.
But Patsy, as my poor late mother said just before she died, every time I turn on the TV, all they're talking about is the menopause, right? And she's right. I mean, so all the programmes, all the daytime programmes on social media, Instagram, whatever, there's not a celeb who's not going through the menopause and you know, getting the message out there that it's
Davina McCall does a lot, doesn't she, at the moment? And that's amazing that they do it now. But I think, you know, for a long time they weren't. No one even discussed what a period was because it was so disgusting, you know. So these things weren't really talked about. Nowadays, we know, actually, we should be talking about it more because the more people talk about it, the more we know about it.
And it affects more than just women, of course. I mean, it's however horrible, however long it goes on for, it affects everybody in that family, really, if they...
I didn't find this very surprising because it seems to me that, you know, middle-class patients are more demanding. Middle-class parents are more demanding. So very often you find that middle classes are doing better because they're more articulate, they're more geared up to demanding public services.
Yeah. Right, protocol in Northern Ireland, the Telegraph is saying there may be just a bit of a breakthrough on this. So what have we got?
Well, yes, the government is pretty well advertising, the United Kingdom government, that there probably is going to be an agreement. This is over the Northern Ireland Protocol. And the unionist interest in Northern Ireland wishes to make sure that there's no change in the status of Northern Ireland. So it wants goods to pass smoothly between Great Britain and Northern Ireland, accepting that there's going to be no border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. And the British government is now saying that it is going to meet all the unionist demands. The unionists have put down 7 so-called red lines, things that they want to see satisfied in the deal. And the British government is saying the deal we're going to do with the European Union is going to satisfy the
Yeah, but will that satisfy the EU? That's the question.
Oh, yeah, no, I think we're talking here about something which has been pretty much agreed between the United Kingdom and the EU. Where I think the doubt is whether the government is being highly optimistic in believing that the unionists are going to accept what it's done. The most obvious thing, which may fall foul of the unionists, is that there is going to be a residual role for the European Court of Justice to resolve issues in the final instance. Now, both the European Union and the United Kingdom are going to say, oh, well, you know, this would be extremely exceptional. And on the whole, it's going to be United Kingdom courts that resolve these things. But whether the unionists will be persuaded of that remains to be seen. Why does all this matter? Because unless the unionists are prepared to accept the protocol, there is no possibility of the restoration of devolved government in Northern Ireland. So there is no executive, there is no assembly. And those are absolutely key elements in the Good Friday Agreement of, 1998. And we're coming up to the anniversary of that. We're hoping for a visit by the American president. And the British government feels very strong pressure to get this done and to get devolution working in Northern Ireland again.
I'm just interested on your take, because I know that the Times broke this story last night, didn't they? And they were basically saying that Europe was worried that this has been sitting on Rishi Sunak's desk for over a week and he hasn't talked about it and hasn't come out. And the suggestion was that he's trying to kind of garner support for this new Northern Ireland deal, because although they're kind of resigned to the fact that Lord Frost will come out and say it's rubbish because it's not the deal that he negotiated, it's the likes of Boris Johnson that they want to get on side, presumably so they can say when President Biden comes, hey, look, we've got a new deal, everyone's on board. Do you think that's what's behind the delay?
Well, I very much hope that Rishi Sunak is talking to everybody in Northern Ireland, as well as obviously in the Republic, which he's doing as a matter of course. Because, you know, the way we got the Good Friday Agreement in the first place was by everyone talking and coming to an agreement that most people thought was impossible. And that's more or less where we are now. We're looking for an agreement which we think to be almost impossible. But you know, Rishi Sunak's job is to convert the impossible into the possible.
OK.
In the Telegraph, we're going to talk about a Banksy artwork and a council being blamed, Patsy, on vandalising it.
Yeah, so, I mean, I'm a big fan of Banksy. I think he, you know, he looks at what's going on and he puts it out into the world in a very peaceful way sometimes, you know. So this artwork was of a 1950s housewife with some rubber gloves on, and she's quite clearly been assaulted by, we assume, her partner, whose legs are sticking out of a freezer, which, you know, it's a highlight to domestic violence at the moment, which is very, it's like an epidemic at the moment of, you know, I know there was the Super Bowl, the halftime Super Bowl thing. They put a fake break-in, and people thought that someone was changing the channel, and so many women are saying their partners got so angry at them and harassed them because of it. So, you know, it does highlight a real issue at the moment. They've removed the freezer in their view for health and safety reasons, which fair enough. But
Which council is this? Where was this?
Where was it? I don't actually know where it was. Let me have a look. Don't
worry, we'll find that out.
But it's Thanet Council.
OK.
Yeah. So people are saying, well, usually it takes very long for them to remove fly tipping. And on this case, they just
like that.
swooped it up. So, but yeah. So...
Okay.
Yeah, well, I'd love to know what people's views are on that. I suppose it's not very Valentine's spirited to face what's considered an artwork.
The piece is called, what was it called? St. Valentine's Mascara. Oh, you get the pun.
Mascara. Michael, the leader of the Labour Party has written in the Times this morning. This is as Labour comes out of special measures after 2 years from their sort of Corbyn-era anti-Semitism. Big strides being made under Starmer.
Certainly that's what he's claiming. He's making a virtue of this. I mean, obviously, it was a terrible disgrace for one of our major parties to be put in special measures for anti-Semitism by the Commission for Equality and Human Rights. So the fact they're coming out of special measures is Starmer's opportunity to blow a trumpet and say that the party has changed a great deal. I wouldn't dispute that is true, although some organisations which are concerned about anti-Semitism are still very concerned about the Labour Party because they think that some of the people who were perpetrators are still in the party. Jeremy Corbyn is not in the party. Starmer makes very clear in this article that he will not be a Labour candidate at the next election. But there are others who are associated with the Corbyn regime who are still members of the party. And one of the things that happens on an occasion like this is that you get old photographs. So the papers today have photographs of the old Corbyn team, which include Keir Starmer. So whilst he's making a virtue of it, it is also an opportunity for the Conservatives to say, wait a minute, you, Keir Starmer, wanted Jeremy Corbyn to be our Prime Minister. That's what you were recommending to us at the last general election.
Michael, from a human point of view, how do you deal with that sort of... whether you agree with Corbyn or not? I mean, Starmer obviously elbowed him, you know, 1 minute he's standing side by side on his shoulder and the next minute he doesn't want to him anywhere in sight.
Yes.
How, from a human point of view, when you're passing each other in the corridors, or, you know, do you say, fancy a cup of tea, or do you say hello, or are they enemies for life, or what happens?
I would say enemies for life. I mean, the surprising thing about the House of Commons to many people might be that there are very strong friendships between the parties and very strong enmities within the parties.
Interesting.
Yes. And the reason for this is, you know, I have very good friends in the Labour Party, and they were only my rivals, in a way, every 5 years at election time. Whereas the people in my own party, you know, when I was Defence Secretary, they wanted my job. They couldn't have been happier if I took a tumble and my job was available to them. So I think it's much easier to get on with the other side than it is with your own side.
Interesting. Were you a Corbyn fan or supporter or voter? Or?
I think I used to be back in the day. I think there were a lot of promises made and things like that. I think at the time he promised something like it was like the uni fees and things like that. And at the time I was going through uni. But I'm in and out of Parliament all the time. I've got friends who are MPs, and it is very much, as you say, it's like, you know, a lot of people have friends on the other side, and you know, sometimes they don't particularly get along with their own party.
And do you like the direction of travel that sorry, I'm trying to say Keir Starmer, but it's coming out wrong, is taking the party in?
In my opinion, no, at the moment. But to be honest, I'm focused on all the bills that are going through. So that's where my focus lies until we get to like another election.
The Daily Mail, Patsy, are asking, whose side are our police really on?
Yeah, I mean, there was a protesters blocking the road the other day, and it was Animal Extinction Rebellion, so they're like part of Extinction Rebellion. They focus on like animal rights. And do you know what? This is the one time I've ever seen the police sort of agree with activists and be on the side of protesters, in my opinion. But yeah, so obviously someone got very frustrated and decided to drag one of the protesters out of the road. I think they were there for about an hour. And understandable, you know, some people say, you know, we need to get to our jobs. We need to, you know, you can't just block a road. We have our normal day-to-day life to get on with. in my opinion, again, is that, you know, if you've got activists that are saying we need you to do this, I think sometimes it's in the government power to be like, hang on, what do they actually need from us? Let's have a look into it, rather than just ignoring it completely. You know, it's protesting doesn't work unless it is disruptive, you know, and I don't agree with all protesting, but, you know...
I'm quite surprised, though, Patsy, to hear you say that, you know, for once the police are on the protesters' side. I mean, there's a lot of bubbling public opinion that the police have been very inadequate in removing these protesters. And there's an example, I think, even in this story, that apparently a policeman was kneeling down, or a police officer kneeling down and talking to the protesters. So a lot of people feel that they've been very sympathetic to the
making
protesters.
cups of tea
and they've not
instances.
kept the public highways open, they've not kept public transport running. And a lot of feeling that the police should be there for the majority and not for the minority, when the minority is being so disruptive. I mean, we do have facilities in a democratic society for people to protest, to organise protest marches, to parade with placards, and for the police to control the traffic around that, but not for people arbitrarily to turn up and stop people getting to work, stop ambulances getting through, stop people going to their schooling and their student life.
So, I mean, I go to protests all the time, so I don't know if you've ever been to a protest. Maybe
I have, actually.
Yeah, fantastic. So, I mean, I know a lot of activists. I'm in that protest world. I always go to protests. I haven't since, before, when the vigil happened, it's only since then that I've been to protests, because I've understood what activists are talking about. I used to think, activists, what are they doing? That's too much, you know. All the time I used to think that. And now I know them and I've spoken to them completely.
Yeah, in case people don't know what you're talking about, the vigil was for Sarah Everard, and that was when you were quite physically manhandled by the police and rose to prominence as a result of that, just to explain.
Police, in my opinion, from what I've seen and experienced, is that police oftentimes do not side with activists at all, which, you know, listen, they've got a certain job and they believe in certain things themselves, you know. I wish they did stay unbiased, but again, from my experience, that's not what I've seen, you know.
No. Biasness may raise its head in this next story. Richard Sharp, he is the chairman of the BBC.
He is.
But he's appointed by the government, or I think it's the Prime Minister's remit, isn't it?
Yes.
To appoint him. So what he does is, beforehand, the Prime Minister says, "Hey, Rich, do you know anybody who could lend me 800,000 quid?" And he says, "Well, I can introduce you to someone who perhaps could do that." And then...
I'd be careful with that.
Yes.
I think it may have been the other way around.
All right.
I think he might have been approached by Sam Blythe, who said, "I'd like to lend the Prime Minister some money."
OK.
And you put me in touch with the Prime Minister. I don't think it was that way round.
Well, the problem is, I suppose, is because there was political involvement or prime ministerial involvement in his appointment as the chairman of the BBC, he should have run a mile, I suppose, from all of this.
Which he more or less claims to have done, because he says he went to the Cabinet Secretary. But in a way, that's water under the bridge, because there's now an all-party committee of the House of Commons which has said that he made an error of judgment. I think they even said a serious error of judgment, because he didn't tell MPs when they were interviewing him about all this, and they feel that he should have done. Now, that to me is the be-all and end-all. I don't see how you survive a House of Commons committee saying that you've made a serious error of judgment. And so I think now we're into one of these situations where we kind of know where this is going to end. We know that he's going to resign. We've seen this in recent weeks, haven't we? People we knew were going to resign, but they held on and held on and held on. And I think maybe, you know, we ought to bring it to a close. But what's happened today is that Jonathan Dimbleby, well, actually speaking on Newsnight last night, has said that Richard Sharp ought to fall on his sword. So that is a very respected voice from the history of the BBC, making it clear. And I'm sure that there'll be, you know, new voices added day after day, because this is going to be a sort of campaign to get Richard Sharp out. Let me declare an interest as Richard Sharp's friend, so I want to be very clear about that. I think his position has been made impossible because of the all-party report. Remember, there were Tories on that report, and not just Labour or other opposition parties. And I think when the report is that clear-cut, there's a lot of weasel words. I mean, Jonathan Dimbleby saying, "Oh, well, even if he didn't do anything wrong, if it looks wrong and it smells wrong, then it is wrong." That seems a bit unjust, but it's probably true. If it looks wrong and feels wrong, it's very difficult to go on.
OK. We can't go on. We've got to stop and say goodbye to you two. And Michael and Patsy will be back in 40 minutes' time. For the moment, thank you very much indeed.
Let's bring you up to date now with the latest headlines and some breaking news in the last few minutes. A 15-year-old girl from Warrington and a 15-year-old boy from Lee have both been charged with the murder of Brianna Gay. The 16-year-old was stabbed to death at a village park in Cheshire on Saturday.
The rate of inflation in Britain has reduced for the third month in a row, but it still remains very high in double digits. Data from the Office for National Statistics within the past 50 minutes shows the Consumer Price Index fell to 10.1% in January. That was down from 10.5% in December. The Chancellor says the fight to reduce inflation is far from over.
London is the world's slowest city to drive in, says new research by TomTom. In 2022, it took an average of 36 minutes and 20 seconds to travel just 6.2 miles in the centre of the capital.
New research by TomTom. It sounds like somebody's name, doesn't it?
Yeah, do you remember TomToms when everyone used to put a sat-nav on their windscreen? Now everyone just uses their phones or their integrated sat-navs.
But it must still be about.
Must still do, yeah. But I remember when I just started out as a reporter, my then boyfriend bought me a TomTom lovingly because he was sick of me ringing, saying I'm lost and having to get the map out.
Oh,
It's difficult as a reporter in the old days, pre-sat-nav.
So we've had the latest inflation figures this morning, 10.1%, as I was just telling you there. So that means very little respite from costs.
Yeah, and it affects all walks of life. Black Sheep Brewery in North Yorkshire has actually been forced to raise prices for its customers by almost 20%, meaning drinkers could pay over £10 for a pint. Goodness me.
Get that over. When I worked as a barman in the late 70s, early 80s, in the club that I worked in, it was 48p a pint. God. And people were up in arms when it went to 52p a pint. So there you go.
And it never goes down, does it? It never goes down.
Whatever goes down. Let's talk to Charlene Lyons now, who runs this brewery. She's the chief executive there. 10 quid a pint, Charlene.
To be absolutely clear, we are not putting our prices up so that it will be £10 a pint. I was saying that if we were to pass on all costs to the consumer, that's what the cost would be. But of course, we can't do that because people will not pay £10 a pint, and nor would we expect them to. And that's kind of where we find ourselves in a really difficult position, trying to absorb as much of the cost as we can, whilst at the same time protecting our customers and our consumers. It's difficult.
How much are you charging for a pint, and how much is that costing you to effectively subsidise with inflation as it is?
So our prices vary depending on the outlet, but the price of our product is actually set by the publicans, not by us, unless it's in our own retail estate. And the prices vary depending on the cask or the keg product or the bottle product, and it can be between £4.20 and £4.80 a pint. But our prices have risen from between 15-18% to hundreds of percent if you're looking at energy and fuel, and we're clearly not putting all of those costs through to the consumers.
But how are you making money, Charlene?
It's very difficult. We're trying to look at things very differently, and we're the same as every other brewery and every other manufacturing industry, in the UK right now. It's the same. Energy and fuel is absolutely crippling. The recent support package from the government is significantly less than the one that's currently in place. So we're all trying to think differently, strategically, about how we operate differently, and it's not easy. We've got the COVID overhang, which is very much there. We've got the cost of living crisis. We've got the macroeconomic pressures. We've got the war in the Ukraine. It's a perfect storm, and we're all trying to work collaboratively together to come up with plans and strategies that work.
It's interesting because obviously the government absolutely laser focus on this, haven't they? They're desperate to try and halve inflation by the end of the year. We're hearing from the Governor of the Bank of England that we're expecting to see a significant drop in inflation soon. Do you feel heartened by that or sceptical?
I think I'm very sceptical. I think it's highly unlikely. We're living in an inflationary world. There are inflationary pressures. Let's be brutal. But the support packages out there are not fair for businesses like ours. we operate as a supplier. We're part of the supply chain, but pubs are a force for good in society. The BBPA recently announced that 1 in 3 pubs might be forced to close because they can't afford to operate. Pubs do so much more than sell beer.
Yeah.
They are a hub for local communities. They are so required in so many places. And if we don't have them, then it's actually communities that miss out. Forget about the profiteering from the brewers and the people that are selling the product. It's about so much more, and that is the terrible shame.
You know, Charlene, you're so right. I don't even drink, right? But I spend a lot of time in pubs for various reasons, and in Ireland we're very sociable. I mean, it is a meeting point. It's almost like a community centre. It's where people come together. I do totally get what you're saying there. But what sympathy do you have, really? I mean, who's listening to you?
So we're working with all of the major trade bodies, and we're working together. The brewing industry is really very collaborative, and together we're able to effectively try and influence government decisions. The CBI are heavily involved, the BBPA are heavily involved, and we are desperately trying to have our voices heard. During COVID, the supply chain with the people that got most affected, the pubs got grants and support. We didn't as a brewery. We got CBILS loans, we got the furlough scheme, but aside from that, we're still very much recovering from that overhang, and it's not easy.
Yeah. And it's not easy getting around in these days, I'd say, as well. You'll get less people volunteering to say, I'll get this, I'll get this. There'll be less and less of that. Charlene, good luck to you. Charlene Lyons is the Chief Executive of Black Sheep Brewery. Cheers.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Very much.
We will be back at the top of the hour with all the latest on today's inflation figures. See you in a moment.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m. Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Inflation has fallen this morning to 10.1%. As the Chancellor warns, the fight, though, is far from over.
Good morning, it's 8 o'clock, it's Wednesday the 15th of February. This is Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster.
Thank you for your company. Leading the news this morning.
The Chancellor has urged caution over inflation as the rate falls to 10.1%. Jeremy Hunt has added that the government will stick to the plan to halve inflation this year.
The Equality Watchdog has announced that it will end its monitoring of the Labour Party 2 years after a damning report into Labour's handling of anti-Semitism complaints.
And we'll bring you a GB News exclusive report on the people smugglers attempting to cross the Channel using a wider area of the southern coastline in an attempt to dodge French police patrols.
And the Queen Consort will wear Queen Mary's crown for the King's coronation, making her the first Queen in modern times not to have one made especially for her. The crown will be modified to remove the controversial Koh-i-Noor diamond, instead featuring gems honouring the late Queen Elizabeth II.
And lots of you have been getting in touch this morning. Thank you for your emails. Keep them coming in, or tweets indeed, and let us know where you're watching or listening from, and we will give you a shout out if we can. I say that and I'm looking at my list of TVVs and none of them have locations on. Sorry about that.
Well, Dennis is saying good news that inflation is going down the right way, going in the right direction, but supermarkets are still increasing their prices. Ella says, in my opinion, inflation is caused by business inflating prices, trying to recover losses from COVID. It can be seen in my cafe. The prices have gone up to a ridiculous price, £4.50 for a cake that used to cost £2.90 before COVID. That's absolutely true. These prices are not sustainable and will have to be reduced as custom falls.
And on the issue of the crown, Jeff says, keep all the diamonds in the crown. What do we expect? A crown from Poundland? And Jeff says Camilla should respect our royal traditions and keep the Koh-i-Noor diamond in the crown. Let us know your thoughts.
Well, now that we've raised the Koh-i-Noor,
yeah,
you can't put it away again, you can't deny it.
What are you going to do with it?
So everybody's going to moan about it anyway. Maybe she should just wear a big hat with a feather in it.
No.
Something. No?
No. There's so many beautiful diamonds, just wear them. They're out of the mines, they're out of the
Well, if they're
wherever they
all
are.
stolen and they're all as a result of slavery or something, nobody's going to want to...
But they're done, they're here.
Yeah.
So,
OK.
let us know your
That's
thoughts.
today's miserable story. Let us know what you want to complain about. Get in touch. Well, that's true. There's people just wake up and say, oh, that coronation, we better attack her crown. Can't have that. Can't have people saying nice things about Camilla and what's going on. Anyway, just my view. We want yours.
OK, it is our top story this hour. The latest inflation figures have been released, with the figure now at 10.1%.
So the Chancellor has warned that the fight's far from over, though, and he said the government must stick to the plan to halve inflation figures by the end of the year.
Well, GB News reporter Olivia Utley is outside the Bank of England for us this morning. Good morning to you, Olivia. I've heard it described this morning as a little bit better than expected, modestly good news, but as the Chancellor says, not where we want to be yet.
No, Isabel, it is good news. 10.1% down from 10.5% last month, and most importantly, down from 11.1% in October, which was a 41-year high. But as you say, it's not quite time to crack open the champagne. We're still in double figures and at a record 40-year high right now. In the short term, it's pretty good for Jeremy Hunt because it, he will argue, validates his decision not to give those inflation-busting pay rises across the public sector. He'll say that his plan to halve inflation, something that Rishi Sunak has staked his reputation on, essentially, is working and he must continue with it. It also means that the Bank of England will be under less pressure to raise interest rates again, which we know is very, very bad for homeowners with a mortgage. The slight fly in the ointment, perhaps, for Jeremy Hunt is that it puts pressure on his decision to cut the energy price guarantee. So he was planning to end the energy price guarantee in April, which would see the average bill go up from £2,500 to £3,000 a month. Now we're seeing wholesale energy prices going down thanks to falling inflation. It looks as though by the middle of the year, prices will be down at £2,400 anyway. So he will be under a lot of pressure to extend that energy price guarantee for a few months, which would cost £3 billion. So it's a bit of a mixed bag for Jeremy Hunt. But as you said in your introduction there, it's slightly better than expected, these figures. It's better than a poll of economists polled by Reuters thought it was going to be a few months ago. So Jeremy Hunt and Rishi Sunak will be pretty happy this morning.
And I wonder, how does this all feed into what we can expect from the building behind you after the budget next month, when we're hearing what the interest rates will be later on in March?
Yeah, so we think that we're over the worst of the big interest rate hikes. So we can probably, we'll have to see what happens with the budget, but we won't expect to see these 0.25% increases every few months indefinitely now. We can expect to see that slowing down now, which of course is very good news for those with mortgages. But remember that interest rates are still very high by recent standards, and that will put pressure on anyone coming off a fixed term mortgage soon. So that pressure hasn't gone away by any means.
OK, Olivia, thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. We're moving on now to talk about the Equality Watchdog, which has announced that it will end its monitoring of the Labour Party. This is 2 years after a report into the handling of anti-Semitism complaints whilst Jeremy Corbyn was leader.
Well, writing in the Times newspaper today, Sir Keir Starmer has hailed the decision as an important moment for Labour and said those who oppose the changes should leave the party.
But will that be enough to wipe out the stigma that has haunted them? GB News political editor Darren McCaffrey will tell you more.
Anti-Semitism was unacceptable in any form in our party or our society.
I think it is a safe place for Jewish people, but if there are real concerns, we have to listen to them.
We are the anti-racist party in this country.
But for years for Labour, allegations of anti-Semitism have stained the party's reputation. Under the leadership of Jeremy Corbyn, candidates, councillors and members were found to be involved in harassment, of using anti-Semitic tropes and dismissing complaints as fake or smears. The problem, it was alleged, went right to the top. Just before the 2019 election, nearly 9 in 10 British Jews said they believed that Jeremy Corbyn was anti-Semitic. They were angry and frightened. In one of the lowest moments for the opposition, Labour joined the BNP in becoming only the second political party ever to be investigated by the UK's human rights watchdog, the Equality and Human Rights Commission. In 2020, they found that Labour had breached the Equality Act 3 times, that there was unlawful harassment and discrimination during Jeremy Corbyn's 4.5 years as leader. Labour under Keir Starmer was placed in special measures. Today, though, the party has turned a corner, with the Commission now finding that over the past 2 years, Labour has improved its standards and procedures.
What we found was that there was interference from the office of the then leader of the Labour Party, and that's all documented in the report that we published in October 2020. Obviously, as you know, the leadership of the Labour Party has changed since then. They've now changed their constitution. In fact, the National Executive Committee has changed the constitution. So whether in respect of the leadership or in the procedural issues that we were also concerned about, we have been monitoring the Labour Party's processes over the last couple of years, and we have now concluded that they've implemented the actions we required of them.
This report is, of course, welcome news for Labour and Sir Keir Starmer, who spent an awful lot of time over the last 3 years trying to put considerable distance between himself and Jeremy Corbyn. And while the Board of Deputies of British Jews believe that things are now better, it does come with a note of caution that problems remain, or as they put it, that the job is not yet complete. As for Jeremy Corbyn, he remains suspended from the PLP, with Labour insistent he will not stand as their candidate at the next election. Keir Starmer will be hoping that this decision and today's report will turn the page on one of Labour's most toxic and difficult chapters. Deborah McCaffrey, GB News.
And we should say, in around an hour's time, just after 9 o'clock, Sir Keir Starmer will be giving a speech about this, and we will be taking it live here on GB News, so stay tuned our way if that is your jam.
So, GB News' head of digital, Dan Falvey, joins us now to give us the reaction and implications for all of this. Dan?
Yeah, so this is a big moment for Keir Starmer setting out his stall. He's pitched a lot of his premiership on moving away from the Jeremy Corbyn era, and this is where he can now say, look, we've actually made that progress. We've been taken out of these special measures as such. But at the same time, being said that there's not a problem with anti-Semitism isn't exactly a great big victory. It basically just puts you back to where you should be. This is, it just means that Labour are now what you would expect from a professional political party.
And yes, they're out of special measures, but can they ever shrug that reputation off? Because there are so many key faces still now in a Starmer cabinet as there were under Corbyn. I mean, Emily Thornberry was in there, Angela Rayner, of course, Keir Starmer himself.
Yeah, and that's what Starmer is still trying so hard to work on. And you see it in almost every speech he gives. He talks about how much he's tried to move away and saying about this is not the same party that it was in 2019. That's what I think we're going to see in this speech as well, because what you see from polling is that while Labour is outpolling Conservatives, when it comes to Keir Starmer's personal polling, it still remains rather low. He still lacks that trust that you'd hope for as a potential future Prime Minister.
Interesting. Speaking of polling, we've done our own this morning. Well, I should say, actually, we put the poll out yesterday. This is for our viewers and listeners, but as it's on Twitter, you can explain that does mean it's open to people who are not necessarily hardcore GB News viewers. But just tell us a little bit about what the poll was looking into.
Yeah, so ahead of today's inflation figures, we put out and asked what do people think was the biggest driver of inflation. And we put out the options of war in Ukraine, Brexit, the COVID response, or other factors. And 54% of people came back and said that they thought Brexit was behind that. As you said, it has to be said that on Twitter, while we have our loyal and regulars get involved, anyone can get involved with these polls. And I think we've seen that some maybe guest viewers have got in touch as well to give their views. So we'd always like, of course, people to get in touch via the GB Views at GB News inbox and let us know exactly
And have you had a look at any of those this morning? Because I've had a little look, and most of them saying they don't agree with that poll.
Yeah, it was interesting. Obviously, this morning we had on a comment as well who said that a lot of this is due to fuel prices as well as a tight labour market, and that we should see that this begin to come down more in the months ahead.
Dan Falvey, as always, thank you very much indeed.
With the time at 12 minutes past 8, an update with what's happening news-wise. And a 15-year-old girl from Warrington and a 15-year-old boy from Lee have been charged with the murder of transsexual girl Brianna Jai. The 16-year-old was stabbed to death at a village park in Cheshire on Saturday.
The rate of UK inflation has reduced for the third month in a row, but remains in double digits. Data this morning from the Office for National Statistics shows the Consumer Price Index, that's the increase in how much things cost, fell to 10.1% in January, down from 10.5% in December. The Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, saying this morning the fight to reduce inflation is far from over.
More than 41,000 people are now known to have died in the earthquakes which struck southern Turkey and northern Syria last week. Rescue workers are continuing to find survivors, though. Last night, a 77-year-old woman was pulled from the rubble alive after being trapped for more than 8 days.
For every person like that that's found, I don't know if it's just the way I'm wired, but I just think about all the other grannies or children that are on their own and can't be heard or can't be reached, who are, at the moment, alive all this time on, but still haven't been rescued. It's awful.
No, but I was thinking today, I was listening to a rescue worker talking about what's the next stage, about clearing rubble, about assuming people are dead. But imagine if they're clearing that rubble with bulldozers and there's someone alive in it. But there's so much devastation.
Yeah.
They're out of time, really. They're out of time.
Yeah, well, the rescue teams in many cases now pulling out, and it's very much about trying to say, as you clear the rubble, or sort out with the humanitarian crisis of people who are displaced from their homes. Millions of people affected. Hugely tragic story, keeping an eye on that, as well as all the other big stories affecting us.
It's Eamonn and Isabel here. This is Breakfast on GB News. The Maritime Rescue Services are being warned they are likely to see migrant boat crossings over a much wider stretch of the southern coastline than they have been doing up to date.
Well, GB News can reveal that people smugglers are increasingly launching small boats further south along the French coast to try to avoid more robust police patrols around Calais and Dunkirk.
Well, our Home and Security editor, Mark White, has an exclusive report for you.
Racing out from the French coast, a local lifeboat crew responding to reports of a small migrant boat in difficulties. But this incident, also involving a French border patrol vessel, is far away from the usual small boat routes out of Dunkirk and Calais. In fact, we're south of Boulogne, more than 50 miles from those routes. It's one of dozens of rescues the lifeboat based in Berck has attended in recent months. A major uptick in activity as people smugglers attempt to avoid increasing police patrols further north.
The numbers have been rising. At the end of 2021, we were involved in many migrant rescues. During 2022, there were significantly more migrants. The further they have to travel by boat, the higher the risks. Travelling from down the coast brings extra dangers. Being in the water for longer brings the danger of hypothermia and even being hit by bigger boats.
For the people smugglers, increased police activity around Dunkirk and Calais has made their regular launch points more difficult to operate from. French authorities are also busy erecting miles of extra security fencing around those beaches, and that's driving the small boats further south. For years, the criminal gangs have predominantly used the shortest route to the UK, pushing off first from the beaches around Calais, then expanding to include areas near Dunkirk. While occasional boats have been launched further south, in the past 6 months, this route, using beaches near Boulogne, has seen a significant spike in activity. With a beach even further south, near Fort Man, also now regularly being used. And for maritime patrols in UK waters, that means a far greater likelihood that small boats will begin showing up on a much longer stretch of UK coastline in the year ahead. It'll mean rescue teams across a wider area being called out more regularly to boats that have been in the water for many hours.
It does put a lot of pressure on the resources. You know, these boats are constructed for one purpose, to shift mass numbers of people, but they're designed, you know, and constructed very poorly. They're not expected to be standing up to any real sea conditions, the amount of people that they are loaded with. So by crossing from further south and spending longer at sea, every second that they're at sea longer than they need to be is just going to increase that risk and that chance of another disaster.
There's little doubt, say maritime rescue experts, that those making small boat crossings from further down the French coast will be at far greater risk, with predictions that up to 80,000 people could attempt to cross in the year ahead. Authorities on both sides of the channel will be stretched to the limit. Mark White, GB News.
Such difficult problems to solve, all of these, and
what's the
it
answer?
gets harder, yeah.
Right, we'll hit the break. After that, we're going to go inside your fridge, our fridge. What should you put in the fridge?
I'm traumatised.
And what should you not? Buck it all in, I think. Throw it in.
Stick it all in. We've photographed our fridges. We'll be having a little sneaky peek after this.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even some ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Click that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back. 8:22 is the time. Still to come on the programme this morning.
We're going to be speaking to the president of the British Sumo Federation. Apparently they do quite well.
Yeah.
And we're going to find out if the British team can go all the way at the World Championships. They are being held in Tokyo.
At 9:15, we'll bring you all the details of the crown that Camilla will be wearing for the coronation.
And keep in touch. We want to hear from you. We're doing a very good job reflecting all that you want. I saw all these comments coming in on The Crown. I thought it was the TV series.
Yeah. No, the actual crown that the Queen Consort will wear.
The actual one. Get in touch.
OK, so if you are just tuning in, welcome aboard. We have been discussing this a little bit this morning. What should be kept in the fridge and what should be kept out of the fridge? Now, we were approached by our producers yesterday and asked to take photographs of our own fridges, which I have to say invoked a state of anxiety in me. I felt like I was photographing my underwear drawer. It felt very intimate, showing the public what was in my fridge.
Would rather see your underwear drawer.
Probably,
personally.
but it was equally traumatic for me. But we're going to get the expert opinion of a nutritionist, aren't we, Eamonn?
And she is Rhiannon Lambert. Rhiannon, good morning to you. Rhiannon, why does it matter what goes in there?
It's health and safety. You know, it's about bacteria growth, preventing you guys from getting food poisoning. It's so important. But I think the reason this has sparked such a debate is because traditionally in different households, you know, some people store their eggs in the fridge, some people keep them in the cupboard. There's lots of debates about how you store sauces, for instance. Bananas, if they're green, then you want them to ripen, keep them out. But if they're already quite ripe, like this is quite a ripe banana I've got here, it's quite spotty, it's perfect for banana bread or something, but that should go in the fridge to preserve it, to enable it to last longer. So it's health and safety guidelines.
Okay, well, we're going to show you Isabel's fridge, and you can tell us what should or should not be in her fridge.
This is traumatic.
It looks quite like my fridge. Is it sure that's your fridge?
It is my fridge, yeah, but my husband has an obsession with sauces, so the whole top shelf and all the doors are stuffed full of sauces for everything, and half the next shelf down. But I did do food safety at school. We got taught it as part of our domestic science, and I always remembered that the raw chicken and things had to be kept on the bottom shelf, and anything cooked up the top in the Tupperware with the cheeses and stuff. So I'm religious about that. I don't keep eggs in the fridge, Rhiannon. I keep those on the countertop. And you can see a couple of old bananas in there at the bottom, but as you say, that's just because they were overripe. But I'm a bit strict, and again, you can see grapes in there. I wouldn't normally keep them in there because I always think if they come straight out of the fridge, they've got no flavour, but they're in there because they're on the turn. What's your analysis?
Fantastic. It looks amazing. I think you've done a great job, but also the bit that's warmer in the fridge is the side, the shelves, and that's a really good place to put jam jars and things that tighten really well and keep airtight better than, say, a Tupperware box, which is never as airtight as a screw, you know, jam jar. The only things that people, like you mentioned, eggs, I think things like honeys and maple syrups are quite controversial as well. I can't see any there in your fridge.
I don't.
But they're the sorts of things that no, don't keep those in the fridge because they're natural sugars and they'll crystallise and potentially encourage bacteria growth if they go in the fridge. So they should be out of the fridge airtight.
What is that? What should be out?
Honey and maple syrup. What about like jams and things? Because I do keep them in the fridge, but my parents don't. And we have a bit of a row in the house because I always think, oh, just shove them in the cupboard. But husband wants them in the fridge.
It's like the chocolate thing as well. I think that's more about taste, but also how things last for longer. So jams have already preservatives in them. So technically, with the addition of sugars, it's like in the book of the sauce here, like I was reading, and it says vinegar, salt, sugar. These sorts of things extend shelf lives. So as long as they're airtight, technically they could be out of the fridge as well as in. So jam it's up to you. It might last a bit longer in the fridge.
Okay.
Right, now let's look at your fancy fridge.
Well, here's my fridge, right? Why is that? Is that two fridges? So is that two pictures there?
That's one side and the other side.
Oh, one side and the other. Yes, I see what you mean. Yes, right.
Gosh, my goodness, how much milk?
Yeah, we have a cow in the back garden.
I was going to say, there's only two of you.
Oh, well, a lot of...
Brilliant.
Well, OK, right, I don't know what's there. I mean, we have grapes in the top shelf, we have jams and things in the top shelf, and then come the cooked meats, and then come my, pies from Waitrose and Marks and Spencer's.
It's very pretty.
And anyway, it's all there. I mean, I don't have any science to it. It's like what suits you. I mean, do you like stuff like... I would have my grapes in the fridge.
You like a cold...
cold grapes.
But you're after the coldness, not the flavour, maybe.
The coldness is important to me.
Yeah.
OK, Rhiannon. Do your worst.
You did a really good job there, Eamonn. I think your fridge looks super organised. You've got the veg in the... You've got the veg in the bottom compartments. Look, you've got your vegetables in there, and that is a really good start. I can see all the healthy items in your fridge, and equally the eggs are in there, and the British Lion eggs do say they will perhaps last longer. And if eggs are kept at room temperature, it's fine, but a lot of people's houses, it depends how hot your house gets. So it really should be kept at a cool temperature. And fridges are below 4 degrees, which is what you ideally want to be storing, items that you want to keep longer at. So I think your fridge looks fantastic.
Well, thank you, Rhiannon. But when it goes wrong, and what is your message out there? Who are you trying to reach, and what are you trying to say to them?
The guidelines by the Food Standards Agency are definitely, if it's got a use-by date on it, you've opened it and it's not fully airtight especially, and follow the care instructions on the pack, put it in the fridge and use within the days it says to use it once opened. Sometimes it's 3 days, sometimes it's a week. I think items like dairy particularly, a lot of people forget when they opened that yoghurt pot. and then you don't know if it's been 3 days or it's been a week, you're more likely to get poorly. So I think how we arrange our fridge is really important. But equally, I love seeing your fridges and I love seeing all the vegetables in there. It's great.
You didn't even see half my fridges, Rhiannon. I am fridge obsessed. So I've got a fridge in the utility room, which is basically for things like ice creams, magnums, chocolate, drinks, by and large, alcoholic and non-alcoholic. So that is almost like entirety. I've got a larder, a cold room, which is just for fruit and veg and goodness knows what in there. I mean, it really is.
Have you got a fridge in your bedroom for your cold water?
I've got a fridge in almost every room. I've got a fridge in my office. I've got a fridge in my drawing room. I've a fridge in my bedroom. My wife's one of these pretentious people who, we're not having fridges. We're not
pretentious people.
It's not like a blooming hotel room in here, whatever. But she's the first one that benefits from cool water during the night, or cool gin and tonic or whatever she's drinking in there. But I love everything a bit chilled, Rhiannon. That's just me, everything. Yeah.
Well, you're unlikely to get poorly, Eamonn, I will say that much. And balance is key in a healthy diet. And one thing I will say is chocolate. Are you guys keeping it in the fridge or are you keeping it in the cupboard?
No, I hate cold chocolate. It's like a travesty. What about you? Cold?
No, it's cold. I mean, like things like, a Mars bar, a Milky Way, or, a block of Cadbury's chocolate or whatever it is. No, I like that tightness, that crispness.
I love it warm, and I feel like almost melting is just perfect. The warmer the better.
Well, it's been very interesting talking to you, and maybe people will send us pictures of their fridges today and see what they do.
I am a bit of a fridge snob. I have to be honest. Like, if I go to people's houses and their fridges, they're a bit pongy or not neatly organised, I do think,
Keep it airtight. Keep everything airtight and you're winning. It's fine.
OK. Rhiannon, thanks very much. Rhiannon Lambert is a nutritionist. Thank you. And that's about your fridges to fridge or not to fridge. I remember when we got our first fridge, which was about 1968 or so.
We didn't have fridges before 1968?
Well, we didn't.
OK.
We didn't have any. And
did not know that.
It was a gas fridge. I remember my father having to light a pilot light.
Wow. So what did you do with in the summer? Where did you keep cold things?
No idea. But we didn't have a fridge. I remember it was a big thing.
Did you have a larder, cold, like dark larder?
Well, we got a... I remember the thing when the fridge arrived, the big thrill was making orange cordial lollipops.
Oh, wow.
Pouring
like
them
the freezer.
into the ice cube tray or whatever, when you had an ice box or whatever for it. But that was an amazing thrill. It was like another world.
Yeah.
You could make
still
your own
like
lollipops.
doing that. Yeah, it's brilliant.
Yeah.
Right, send us your fridge pictures. After that, we'll go through the papers today with Michael Portillo and Patsy Stevenson.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back. Eamonn Holmes, back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamonn. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamonn Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
8:35, let's take a look at your newspaper front pages. This is how they're shaping up.
Times, first of all, we'll be talking about this story just at 9 o'clock this morning. It focuses on the Labour Party, Sir Keir Starmer telling those that oppose his anti-Semitism reforms to leave Labour.
The Telegraph covers the efforts by the government to crack down on sick notes at work.
And The Sun leads with the search for Nicola Bulley. This is a picture here that police have come across a glove. There's a stain on the glove. We don't know what it is, but found near where she was last seen. Could it be connected to her?
The Mail reports on the Queen Consort's crown as she opts to go without the controversial Koh-i-Noor diamond.
And we've got two diamonds reviewing the papers for us this morning. We've got Michael Portillo and we've got Patsy Stevenson. Very good to see both of you. And a medical breakthrough here, which might be a miracle for this child who's 19 months old, Michael.
It's a very moving story, this. The little girl is called Teddy Shaw, and she has a genetic disorder which would kill her in infancy. And indeed, she has a sister who also has the medical disorder, and unfortunately, the sister is terminally ill. But for Teddy, a new drug has arrived. It costs $2.8 million or pounds a throw, and it has cured her, apparently. She is now free from symptoms, and it looks as if Teddy Shaw will survive. Only about 4 children a year are born with this very rare condition in Britain. Apart from the great human interest of the story, what I think is interesting about it too is that the drug is a genetic modifier. It modifies your genes. And I think so much of medical future is going to be about this. The way we're going to prevent cancers in the future, or motor neurone disease, or Alzheimer's possibly, may well be through genetic modification. And this drug is a genetic modifier. So I think it is highly significant. Of course, the cost is also highly significant, although the costs of all drugs come down over time.
Yeah, I feel for people. I mean, this is brilliant news for Teddy Shaw and her family. But then there are other people who will say, my child just needs this drug, which is only available in the USA or whatever, and we need this sort of money. And somebody somewhere makes a decision to say no, and somebody somewhere, in this case, has made a decision to say, yes, I think this is unusual that the money would be granted to spend nearly £3 million on what is a fantastic treatment and cure for young Teddy Shaw.
Yeah. Of course, I sympathise with that. There is an organisation in this country which is called NICE, which has to make decisions about which drugs are going to be available on the NHS. I don't know this, but I suspect that in this case, a contributory factor has been that this is a drug which is entering into a new field, which is deeply significant and broadly significant. That may be why Teddy Shaw is able to receive this drug.
Well, also, I suppose you have to balance in the cost of if she wasn't terminally ill but she had a genetic condition, what other medications would she be having to have for the rest of her life, and what would that add up to? I mean...
Unfortunately, in this case, the life would be very short.
Right, OK.
Yeah. We stay with medical matters, Patsy. This is in the Mail, and they're talking about a male pill breakthrough. By that, I mean a contraceptive pill.
Yeah, I mean, we've always had a pill for women, contraceptive pill, that's, you know, been going on for a very long time now. But this male pill apparently doesn't even involve hormones. It's very safe, and it's got a 100% success rate at the moment, which is amazing. They tested it on mice, and I think they say... So it can be taken half an hour before the deed, yeah, so it says 100% success rate. I think it's for only about 2 hours, though, that it works, and they're hoping that... I mean, listen, it depends on who you're with, but I think they're looking to make it extended to 24 hours, apparently, so... Yeah.
The very fact that you can take it half an hour before the deed, as you say, that's very quick acting.
I mean, yeah, you'd have to know as well, so
You'd
that
have
might...
to have great trust.
Might take away spontaneity a bit, maybe sometimes.
Yeah, how many people schedule intercourse? I don't think that's necessarily going to work yet as a kind of fail-safe practice.
Yeah.
Whereas
You've got a 2 hour window.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know. I think it'll be easier when you can take it on a daily basis, don't you think, rather than...
Yeah, and I think this is the start, hopefully, because, you know, they've been teasing about it for a while, but now they've got something that works. Hopefully, they can progress it to you take it maybe once a day, maybe once a week. I don't know how it'll work, but that will be fantastic. But, I mean, it's based on men who don't have the soluble adenylyl cyclase, which helps the sperm to mature and propel themselves towards the egg. So it actually inhibits that. So it makes it not work. But I wonder if taking it for a long time actually would make you infertile. So there's a lot around it that probably needs to be tested, but it's good news.
Michael, we'll go to the Telegraph. President Putin, he's taking precautions as well, of a different sort.
Well, he's got himself an armoured train, apparently. Why does he need an armoured train? Because he needs to travel to all his lovely country houses. He's got dashers by lakesides close to Moscow. So they've built him a $13.5 million armoured train. And on top of that, they built him 3 railway stations and some new tracks. It's quite a heavy train, so it probably needs special tracks. And why? Because he feels that if he flew, he'd be in danger. Now, I don't know whether he's just got a fear of flying or whether he thinks that he could be shot down. But I thought the story played to my idea of his megalomania and my idea of his paranoia, that he is so, you know, frightened that if he's in a plane and it pops up above the horizon, he's going to be zapped by Ukraine or by NATO or whatever. So I found it a thoroughly interesting story. But is it not so often the case that dictators go in for these extraordinarily extravagant projects? And this one, of course, is in order to transport him to his other extraordinarily extravagant projects, that is to say, his country houses.
I was of the impression that he wasn't going many places, that he was pretty much bunkered up somewhere and so paranoid and afraid he was staying in the one place. I imagine you're someone who's probably travelled by train in Russia. Have you?
I have.
And what's it like? I mean, have you travelled from
He just
Moscow
sees this as a future
Dashers?
programme. That's what he sees this as.
Train travel in Russia is variable, but at the top end, it's very good. Moscow to St. Petersburg, they have a fairly high-speed train. I would say probably comparable with British trains, right? You know, between London and Edinburgh, it'd be a comparable sort of thing, travelling about 100 miles an hour, very comfortable, very nice, very quick. And there are lots of other trains which are not as good.
Have you ever seen a film called Bullet Train starring Brad Pitt?
I don't believe I have.
Well, don't. I watched it at the weekend. It's 2 hours I'll never get back again. Have you seen that one?
I haven't, no.
Dr. Zhivago, that had some
yeah,
beautiful Russian trains, yeah. Patsy, you want to talk about S Club 7? We should state at this point Eamonn's great friend, member of the
Dual
lineup. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so Yeah, so they're hoping to reach the top of the charts again after revealing plans to release new music. Now, I have to tell you, S Club 7 are on my morning playlist because they're fantastic. I think, you know...
From a feel-good point of view?
Yeah, of course. I mean, there's a lot of, you know, as we were saying earlier, me and Michael were trying to find some uplifting pieces of news and sometimes there isn't. So it's nice to stick on a few good tunes sometimes.
Do you know what, it reminds me of lockdown. During lockdown, when my children were being homeschooled, the primary school put together something called Reach for the Stars, and the teachers were all dancing and singing to the track. And I mean, I kind of grew up to S Club 7, so for me, it's like seeing it come back for the kids. I love it.
Would you go to the concert?
Oh, I don't want to say no because I know you're great friends with Joe. I love it, but I probably wouldn't. You would.
Joe's developed. Joe's a marvellous sort of cabaret singer.
She's the star of it. Let's be honest. She carries the whole 7.
She has a very mature voice. She's very, very good to see as a solo artist. But my worry for them is, well, you know, they were a kiddies sort of group, but you know, nostalgia's big business.
Yeah.
And the kids that grew up with them, now they're
taking
older
their kids.
as well. Because, taking their kids as well. But, I mean, for me, I'll never stop listening to S Club 7.
In case you haven't seen ABBA Voyage, but I'm sure you have, that's absolutely fantastic. You know, all these avatars appearing on stage, superb show.
Here's the Mail. After moving homes 5 times in less than 2 years, Seren has been dubbed Britain's fussiest feline, right?
Aww.
Yeah.
There she is.
I can't believe I'm talking here about a fussy cat on television, but there we are. That's all part of the job, isn't it?
Did you not choose this?
I did, actually.
Oh, good.
Only because I was told that Eamonn liked to have some light-hearted content. So this cat that is 12 years old apparently is quite fussy. So when it goes somewhere, it doesn't particularly like there to be any other animals in the vicinity. Certainly doesn't want there to be another cat. Is not very keen on children. Likes to have its own space, preferably its own room. Prefers to have a conservatory if possible, so that it can observe the world from the conservatory. And some owners, I think, 5 in recent times, have not lived up to Seren's standards.
Yeah.
So Seren has been taken back to the cat's home, waiting for somebody who understands her special needs. So there might be a viewer at the moment who would understand this cat with special feline behaviour.
And where might they find her? Where will she be sent back? Battersea Cats and Dogs Home, or where is she living? If people do want to track down,
she's living on page 9 of the Daily Mail.
Good answer.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Worcestershire. Evesham in Worcestershire.
Okay.
You're a cat person, aren't you?
I love cats, but I can't take a cat on yet. Not till we move house.
Does a cat not take themselves on? From what I understand, they're very
independent. Yeah. But I'd be worried they'd get squashed. So
Seren does like to sit on a lap.
Oh, a lap cat.
You'd be like a Bond villain. If I had a cat there, it'd be just like...
Are you a cat person?
I think even without.
Even without. Yeah. Right. Now, there's a man, Patsy, you want to talk about. This is The Guardian, page 3 in The Guardian, and his name is Brian Haw.
Yeah, so Brian Haw...
Not Lord Haw, is it? No? No?
I don't know.
What's the story?
He was an activist. He's passed away, unfortunately, of lung cancer.
Right, so he's a modern-day activist.
I don't know the difference between a modern-day activist...
No, I mean, he's not...
He's current, as in he's
current,
recent.
Yeah, he's definitely current. He's been doing it for a long time as well. He was very anti-war. You know, it's all about peace. He was a peace activist. So they're looking to... raise a statue in honour of him on his crutches, as he was, I think he was at 60 years old and on crutches and still fighting for peace. I think he actually was camped outside near Parliament Square in a tent.
I think he's
wind
quite
and rain.
well known. I actually think, as you drive past for years, he was out there and he was in this tent.
Yeah, I have a feeling that I came across this person. By the way, he's about as far from Lord Haw as you
as you can
possibly
get. Yeah, right.
Just by,
You know who Lord Haw was, do you?
Lord Haw.
As in George or War.
Haw.
Yeah, but was it all linked? No.
No, I think he was
propagandist for the Germans.
Originally Irish, but he went over to Germany and broadcast on behalf of Germany. Germany calling, propaganda that would English language listeners would absorb.
Right.
Traitor.
Okay.
It's another thing where you look at me and say, how does he know that?
Yeah.
I don't know. Just do. But this man, he would have been a pain in the backside to a lot of people and a hero to a lot of others, and he has now died, and he would have been very well known on the political map outside the Houses of Parliament.
Yeah, and they're looking to raise £50,000 for the statue. And they hoped that, you know, he would... I think his partner said she wished she knew this would sort of happen earlier and come up with the idea earlier so he could see it, but he never got to see it.
So yes to a statue from you, yes to a statue from you?
No.
No. OK, I thought so. Michael Portillo, Patsy Stevenson, thank you both for reviewing our papers this morning. We've loved having you aboard. For now, we're going to give you an update on the latest headlines this hour.
A 15-year-old girl from Warrington and a 15-year-old boy from Lee have been charged with the murder of transsexual girl Brianna Jai. The 16-year-old was stabbed to death at a village park in Cheshire on Saturday.
The rate of UK inflation is reduced for the third month in a row, but remains in double digits. Data from the Office for National Statistics shows the Consumer Price Index fell to 10.1% in January, down from 10.5% in December. The Chancellor says the fight to reduce inflation is far from over.
More than 41,000 people are now known to have died in the earthquakes which struck southern Turkey and northern Syria last week. Rescue workers are continuing to find survivors, though. Last night, a 77-year-old woman was pulled from the rubble alive after being trapped there for more than 8 days.
OK, so we are talking a lot about inflation this morning. Of course, it is the rate at which prices rise, and it is remaining high this morning. The Office for National Statistics calling it 10.1%. That is the number of people using food banks across the UK is also on the rise.
OK. A report now from Lisa Hartle who has been to speak to a charity which is offering cooked meals using food donated by supermarkets.
Food Cycle is a charity combining food donated from shops, spare kitchen spaces and volunteers. This is in East Ham, London, but there are over 60 hubs around the UK, each open one night per week.
One of the things that we pride ourselves on is on no questions asked. So on a weekly basis, we don't ask our guests why they're coming or what they're doing, but we do an annual survey just to find out a bit of background, who's coming along and using the services, and most importantly, why. So one of the key things that we found was that 68% of our guests are already worried that they can't afford to buy the food that they need, and 68%, same number, said that they were behind on their bill. And really worryingly, 92% of our guests said that they were concerned that the price of food is going to continue to increase, which is really worrying figures that we're hearing that already. So that was run in December last year, and so now we're in February. We can only imagine that figure is probably even higher.
Some people come here for company, whereas others have been affected by the sharp rise of inflation, pushing food prices up.
Because people come here for different, not only for the cost of living, it could be just to get out of the house, you know, or a bit of boredom or socialise.
Good food, every time good food. It's a crisis time. The England 40,000, the food banks, all of the help people. I like this country, very good people. I am very happy. 10 to 10.
Whoever's watching, come and join us. It's a very nice place and nice food. Nice staff, nice volunteers, yes.
The volunteers have a bit of a challenge on their hands as they never know what food will be donated until the last minute.
So we just get a whole load of vegetables that come and then somebody looks at it and says, oh, I think we could do this. And then we do it.
It's fun to kind of, you know, make dishes up as you go along. It's really nice to see our guests happy and enjoying the food.
So since I've been coming here, it ranges from 20 to 40 people. Like they say thank you to all the chefs, which is really sweet.
You can sort of tell if they don't like it because the plates come back full. But so far that's not happened to me, so that's good.
The charity says they're making plans to be able to help more people should the cost of living crisis worsen. But the hope is that the demand for meals will drop as inflation does. Lisa Hartle, GB News, London.
Thanks for that, Lisa. Just amazing what people do in those food kitchens, and the idea that they then have to prepare a menu with ingredients. It's like a cooking competition on TV. Incredible. With ingredients, they don't know what's coming, and yet they do it. Now, some people that have to eat a lot are sumo wrestlers, and sumo wrestling you associate with Japanese culture, but...
Well, it turns out Derby is now the sumo mecca of the UK.
Who would have thought? The British sumo wrestling team, didn't know we had one, reckon they have a chance of taking home gold at the World Championships in Tokyo, which are coming up later this year. Let's go to Steve Pateman. Steve is the president of the federation. Steve, good morning to you. I don't mean to be rude to you, but I just had no idea that Britain had a sumo wrestling team.
Oh, yes. Well, in fact, we've been fairly successful over the years. And the best we've achieved in Japan is a silver medal in the World Championships, actually in Tokyo itself. And we've had 3 or 4 other bronze medals in the World Championships. So over the years, we've been fairly successful.
I have 2 facts about sumo wrestling. You can tell me if they're true or false. One is that to train, you have a good meal and go to sleep. And the second one is all over in less than 10 seconds. Nonsense or true?
Nonsense, really. Sumo's a highly technical sport. I mean, when I weighed about 110 kilos, I actually beat the world champion, who was over 300 kilograms.
Wow.
So yes, you can be a big person, but a smaller guy can always win.
Oh, interesting.
How come we've reached a level, Steve, where we can take on the Japanese in their own backyard?
Well, we train very hard in the UK. We've got centres all over the country, and we've been at it since the mid-1980s. We were the first country in Europe to be invited to Japan, and we were the first country in Europe to actually have a professional sumo wrestler back in around about 1990. So we're very experienced at sumo wrestling.
I think I could join. I'm looking at that man's moves there. Just to
Oh,
go back
stop
to that
it,
picture.
Eamonn.
No, I am. I'm saying
They're athletes.
I thought I was the only person in the world that had moves like that, but I've got world-class
athleticism.
Moves. Yeah, I could qualify for that.
Good to know. I was going to say, do you have ambitions to be included in the Olympics, for example?
Well, we are on the reserve list, and every 4 years or so, they vote for which sports can participate in the Olympic Games. Paris in next year's the next Olympics. We're hoping to be in the Olympics in the following 4 years. So, but it's a long wait. But sumo is a very, very spectacular sport. It's exciting. And some of these sports currently in the Olympics, you know, by comparison, they're a little bit bland.
Yeah,
fair enough.
And when are the World Championships just finally, Steve, so we can all tune in and follow you guys?
Well, first we've got the European Championships in Warsaw in April, and then in October, the first weekend in October, in Tokyo, the home of sumo, we have the World Championships, and we're hoping to bring back 3 or 4 medals.
Fantastic. Well, good luck. And thank you for shining the light, flying the flag, and enlightening us this morning. Pardon the pun. And we really appreciate it. Steve Pateman, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, look, with that, we'll take a break, and then we have a news conference from Sir Keir Starmer. He's talking about anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, and we'll bring you all of that after this short break. Don't go away.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Inflation has fallen to 10.1% as the Chancellor warns the fight is far from over.
Hello there, very good morning to you. Just after 9 o'clock on Wednesday, the 15th of February. Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel. Webster on your screen, online, on the radio until 9:30.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. The Chancellor has urged caution over inflation as the rate falls to 10.1%. Jeremy Hunt added that the government will stick to the plan to halve inflation this year.
The Equality Watchdog has announced that it will end its monitoring of the Labour Party 2 years after a damning report into its handling of antisemitism. We'll have a live news conference with Sir Keir Starmer following in the next few minutes here at GB News.
And Camilla will wear Queen Mary's crown for the King's coronation, making her the first Queen in modern times not to have one made for her. The crown will be modified to remove the controversial Koh-i-Noor diamond, instead featuring gems honouring the late Queen.
So there you go. We've got your comments on this. Jeff is saying, keep all the diamonds in the crown. What do we expect? A crown from Poundland? Ronnie says Buckingham Palace needs to return the jewels back to the country we stole them from. The crown would look just as stunning without stolen jewels in it.
Keep those thoughts coming in. Now, the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, is just about to start his address on the Equality and Human Rights Commission's findings into his party's improvements since the anti-Semitism scandal of 2020.
Well, in the studio now with his take, his preview on this as we await Sir Keir, is our political correspondent, Tom Harwood. Tom, is this his attempt to draw a line under all of this? Is there a line drawn under all of this, or what way do you read it?
Well, yes, the Labour Party, of course, has been in special measures for the last few years, put into it by the EHRC after there was a number of counts of anti-Semitism found within the party, unlawful harassment, members being made to feel unsafe at meetings, and a refusal at the very top of the party to acknowledge or understand, or perhaps even at the worst end of the spectrum, maybe even just sort of turn a blind eye to the anti-Semitism that was found within the party. Now, Sir Keir Starmer...
just about to take to the stand, and we can listen to that speech. I'll be hoping that this is a watershed moment for the Labour Party.
Thank you. Thank you, Marie. Today is an important moment in the history of the Labour Party. It's taken many, many months of hard work and humility to get here. It's meant rebuilding trust, not just with the Jewish community, but with all those who were rightly appalled by the culture of the party under the previous leadership. When I became leader, I said I would turn Labour around and give it back to the British people. And the most important and urgent part of that was in tearing out anti-Semitism by its roots. Anti-Semitism isn't evil, and no political party that cultivates it deserves to hold power. I said from the start that we would be judged not on our own terms, but by the return of those who felt they could no longer support us. The first step on that journey was to accept the findings of the Equality and Human Rights Commission. But it was deeper than that, because we also had to make clear that there was no space for anyone who didn't do the same. That is as true today as it was then. Let me be very clear. Those who seek to blame others or downplay what happened in our party are themselves part of the problem, and we will have zero patience or tolerance of that. Having accepted the Commission's report, the onus was then on us to begin to right the wrongs of the past. I'm proud to lead a party and a team that have worked tirelessly to do so, and it is as a result of that work that I'm speaking here today. But while it is an important moment, it is not one for celebration. It is one for reflection on how a party that has always prided itself on anti-racism, on its commitment to equality, its belief in a better, fairer Britain, could have fallen so far as to betray its own principles as well as the principles of the country. This is also a moment to apologise once again to all those who were hurt, to all those who were let down, to all those driven out of our party who no longer felt it was their home, who suffered the most appalling abuse. Today, on behalf of the entire Labour Party, I say sorry. What you've been through can never be undone. Apologies alone cannot make it right. But just as I promised to take this issue head on, today I make you a number of further promises. Firstly, that under my leadership there will be zero tolerance of anti-Semitism, of racism, of discrimination of any kind. And secondly, that every day I will work ceaselessly to bring this party back to the British people. Be in no doubt, the job of restoring Labour is not complete, not even close. I don't see today's announcement as the end of the road. I see it as a signpost that we're heading in the right direction. I feel humbled when I think of all those who've tirelessly dedicated themselves to getting Labour back on track. All those inside and outside the party who've made it their mission to restore, renew and rebuild Labour on behalf of the country. It's thanks to them that we can say firmly, proudly, confidently, the Labour Party has changed. Not because it was convenient to do so, not by fiddling around the edges, not just until the next person to lead the party comes along, but permanently, fundamentally, irrevocably. We have changed from a party that looked inward to a party that meets the public gaze, from a party of dogma to a party of patriotism, from a party of protest to a party of public service. Change is never easy, and I understand that some people won't like the changes that we've made. But I say this with all candour. The Labour Party is unrecognisable from 2019, and it will never go back. It will never again be a party captured by narrow interest. It will never again lose sight of its purpose or its morals. And it will never again be brought to its knees by racism or bigotry. If you don't like that, if you don't like the changes that we've made, I say the door is open and you can leave. But to all those who can see we've changed for the better and are excited about doing even more, to all those who dream of a Britain that is fairer, greener, more dynamic, to all those who want to make this great country greater still, I say the door is open. Come in. Make us your home again. Working together, I believe we can do great things for our country. I believe we can be a force for good. And that starts today. No one knows better than me that there is much still to do. That is why my third promise to you today is that I will not rest for a moment until the job of changing the Labour Party for the better and then the job of changing our country for the better are complete. Thank you very much.
Expecting the Labour leader there to take some questions from the floor. Let's have a listen in.
From the media, and I think Alex from BBC was starting with you.
Thank you very much, Sir Keir. Alex Forsyth, BBC News. You've talked today about how the Labour Party on your watch has changed. Can you say categorically whether or not the former leader, Jeremy Corbyn, will stand for Labour at the next election?
Let me be very clear about that. Jeremy Corbyn will not stand for Labour at the next general election as a Labour Party candidate. What I said about the party changing, I meant, and we are not going back, and that is why Jeremy Corbyn will not stand as a Labour candidate at the next general election. Thank you, Alex. I think, Marie, we're coming to you, Sky News.
Hi, Keir Starmer, Marie Aurora from Sky News. You served under Jeremy Corbyn in his shadow cabinet. And today we've had the campaign against anti-Semitism come out and say that they still don't think they've had enough investigative, essentially disciplinary investigations into anti-Semitism against more than 12 MPs. Don't you think this undermines your commitment to Jewish people and Jewish voters, that you're taking this seriously?
Well, thank you for that question. I think and I hope that my actions over the last 2 to 3 years have made it absolutely clear that my commitment is to tear anti-Semitism out of this party by the roots. That was the first thing I said as leader of the Labour Party. That's why we've taken the action that we've done. That's why I am pleased today that the Commission has said that they're confident in the plan that we have put forward. But look, as I said a moment ago, this is not the end of the road. This is just a signpost, and we must be as robust as we go forward as we've been until now. And whatever cases and allegations are put to us, we will take the same robust approach. Today is an important day, but it's certainly not the end of the road in relation to that. Thank you. Harry, ITV.
Good morning. Harry Horton from ITV News. You served under Jeremy Corbyn in his shadow cabinet. When you were serving under Jeremy Corbyn, could you not see anti-Semitism spreading throughout the party? And if you could, why didn't you do more to speak out about it?
Well, Harry, thank you for that question. As you know, it's a matter of record that on anti-Semitism I challenged the previous leader both in the shadow cabinet and publicly on that. And it's absolutely clear that the Labour Party lost its way, and that's why I knew that my first duty as leader of the Labour Party was to change the Labour Party and to tear anti-Semitism out. That's why, on my acceptance speech, I made an apology on behalf of the Labour Party and made that my commitment. And what I asked of all those that were affected was the opportunity to be given the space to do what I needed to do and to be judged by my actions. And I'm grateful to all of those who gave me that space and are now judging me on my actions. Thank you, Lee.
Lee Harkin from Jewish News.
Yeah.
Are you today promising you will take action against any MP, any councillor, any member in the party who denies anti-Semitism, who uses the phrase purge of socialism to excuse anti-Semitism? Are you pledging action against these people?
Lee, thank you very much for that question. I hope I've made it clear this morning and previously that all those that deny there is a problem, there was a problem of anti-Semitism, all those that pretend it was exaggerated are part of the problem themselves and will be dealt with under the rules of the Labour Party, because it's very important that we are robust in relation to those views that this was all somehow exaggerated and that the extent has been disproportionately blown out. I don't accept that, and I don't accept that has a place in our Labour Party. Thank you, Lee. And Ben from the Jewish Chronicle, please.
Good morning, Sir Keir. Hi. So it seems this is a really big day for the Labour Party. It seems the upper echelons are in the right place and the HRC is happy with the progress. But as alluded to by Marie van der Zyl of the Board of Deputies, there are still issues at the local level with councillors and party officials. JC revealed just yesterday a party official local party official, had been posting, extremely questionable content for many, many years, up until most recently. So, are you confident that issues are being addressed at the local level, and how can you reassure Jewish people who want to get involved in local party politics that they will be safe to do so? Thank you.
Well, Ben, thank you for that question. The fight against anti-Semitism is never over. And that's why it's so important that I make it clear today that, of course, it's an important day for the Labour Party that the Commissioners decided that our plan has been operated and they're content with it. But it doesn't mean the fight against anti-Semitism is over anywhere in any political party, including my political party, and we will continue with the same robust approach, because the changes that we've put in place are fundamental, they're substantial. The Labour Party has changed. And the Commission would not have signed off today if they didn't think it was fundamental and substantial. And so wherever there is anti-Semitism, we will chase it down and we will deal with it in the same robust way as we've done over the last 2 to 3 years. Thank you. And I think we've just about got time for Theo from LBC.
OK, well, before we go any further with that, we're going to bring in our political correspondent, Tom Harwood, here in the studio watching that with us. Sir Keir saying this is not a time for celebration, a time for reflection. What did you make of what he had to say?
I think it's incredibly pertinent that some of those answers were very clear. Clearly, Sir Keir Starmer went into this question and answer session knowing exactly what he was going to say, particularly about the future of Jeremy Corbyn, which has been hanging in the balance for a long time since he was suspended in the wake of the EHRC report, where Jeremy Corbyn was accused of underplaying the role of anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, saying it had been exaggerated for political ends. Corbyn was suspended off the back of that because he would not apologise to the Jewish community. And it really now comes to an end, this sort of multi-year saga of whether or not Jeremy Corbyn will be readmitted to the Labour Party. Sir Keir Starmer couldn't have been clearer there. He won't be a candidate at the next election for the Labour Party.
He made 3 promises and he also apologised on behalf of the Labour Party. He'll be hoping then that this is a watershed moment. Do you think he's achieved that?
He will be hoping that. Clearly there is a long way to go. 9 out of 10 Jewish people in the country believed that the Labour Party was anti-Semitic just 3 years ago. Now, to turn that around in such a short space of time is a huge task, and clearly there are worried voices. We heard just in that session from the words of the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism, who still believe there are problems within the Labour Party. But I think for many Jewish people in the country, there will be a sense sense of relief that the Labour Party is at least taking it seriously. It might not be completely dealt with as an issue, but the fact that the leadership is talking about it, I think, will provide a great deal of comfort to many people.
More reaction to what Sir Keir's having to say and what the Equality and Human Rights Commission saying that they are ending their monitoring of the Labour Party's action plan to drive out anti-Semitism. Is that the last we're going to hear of that? Well, we'll be covering it throughout the day on the station. Tom, thank you very much indeed. Tom, back at 9:30. Up next,
we'll be talking about the coronation, all the details on Camilla's crown after this.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Well, the coronation of King Charles is getting ever closer, just start of May.
Yeah, really looking forward to that. And of course, his wife, the Queen Consort, is to wear Queen Mary's crown for his coronation, making her the first in modern times not to have one made for her.
OK, so the crown will also not include the controversial Koh-i-Noor diamond. Instead, it will feature other diamonds which were part of the late Queen's personal jewellery collection. To tell you more, Royal Broadcaster historian Rafe Heidelman-Koo with all of this. Rafe, just what's your overall view?
Well, many of us were actually hoping that Queen Camilla would actually wear Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother's crown, made for her in 1937 for her coronation with George VI, particularly because she was such an important figure in the King's life, and it would have been a lovely connection to have there. But as you say, the crown features the Koh-i-Noor diamond, and I think the decision was made that it would be better not to, to avoid stoking tensions with India. You have to remember that the Koh-i-Noor diamond is an extremely symbolic diamond for the Indian population, and we have a Hindu nationalist government in place with Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister, and very much playing to a home audience when he has said that it would cause distress to Indians if the Koh-i-Noor diamond was worn.
I mean, is there not also an argument that it would also be a nod to India? I mean, often royals will wear things that have come from other places in a nod to them, as a tribute to them, and I know that there are...
It would be unless it wasn't nicked.
Oh, maybe, yes, and hugely valuable. And I know it's not just India that also stake a claim on it. I think Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran...
It's important to say that, actually. No country has an ironclad claim to the Koh-i-Noor diamond, and actually it's had a very peripatetic existence. It's gone from the Mughal Empire in India, taken over by the Persian Empire in Iran, then it went to the Durrani Empire of Afghanistan, then to the Sikh Empire, and finally to the British Empire. And the way that many of those empires got it was far less honest, I would say, than the British way, because the British at least had a peace negotiation and the Treaty of Lahore of 1849 with Dalip Singh, with the Sikh Emperor, rather, I should say, of the time. They were able to get it that way. So there are lots of claims to it, and yet in modern times you have Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran and India all laying claim to it. Yes. I think it's far better to have it where it is now, where it will be seen by a global audience, potentially of billions, and surely that's the key thing, to actually have this great diamond exposed.
Are trying to interpret and read things into the signs that we're seeing here. And what's your early take on the Charles and Camilla reign?
Well, I mean, this is all, as I said before, this is the key period between the accession and the coronation, when all focus is supposed to be on the new king and queen as they place their stamp on the monarchy and really make it their own and lay out what they see as their blueprint for the future. And that's all been overshadowed, unfortunately, by other events that have taken place. Obviously, we know who we're talking about. And it's just been a shame that everything has been sidetracked. And now, at least, we're with Harry and Meghan retreating into the spotlight at the moment, it seems. This is the time to actually get the whole royal family to try to create that positive atmosphere we need to have to build up anticipation for the coronation. We've been denied that all of this time. This is the first time in 70 years we're going to have the most important ceremonial and constitutional event in our history. It's one of those key moments in time when you'll say, I know where I was during the Constitution. Yeah. Every generation forges its national identity around these sorts of events. And so I think right now is a great time for us to put the past to the past and look forward.
OK, Rafe Heidelman-Koo, thank you very much. And I know you're planning already how you're going to be doing the coverage, doing some stuff for us for the coronation of the King as well. So lots to look forward to.
Lovely, thank you.
Yeah, I think we've now entered that period where we realise it is going to happen.
The build-up.
It's going to be a big time, and the build-up is underway. Let us know what you're doing for the build-up and how you're feeling about all of this. That brings us to the end of our show for today. We're going to be back, Isabel and myself, tomorrow morning from 6 o'clock right through until 9:30.
Up next, Tom Harwood is with you with the briefing, and we will see you bright and early. Have a lovely day.
Thanks for watching.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel.